Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's extraordinary council meeting for today, Tuesday, the 7th of May. It's good to have everybody around the table, and that reason we don't need to receive any apologies for today. Thank you. Our usual health and safety applies for this afternoon's meeting. Should we need to exit the building, out the door that you arrived, or to my left and your assembly point of on the grass alone. So beside the St. John's, sorry. This today is a really important day for us as a council, and so I am obviously going to read the affirmation, and then we will begin our meeting as normal. Today we pledge that we will faithfully and impartially use our skills, wisdom and judgment throughout the discussions and deliberations ahead of us today in order to make responsible and appropriate decisions for the benefit of the district at large. We commit individually and as council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the values that we believe distinguish and enrich our district. Thank you. In regard to the one decision item today, councillors, is there any conflict of interest declaration that needs to be noted in the papers? Can I just note, please, that I have two of the submitters, one Martin Black, we heard from him when we orally received, but also the one submitter today, the late submitter is Peter Wink, who is my daughter's son, father-in-law. So I just want to note that I have had no discussions in regard to their submission on either parties, but I just want to note that having a connection, but I do not believe it constitutes them. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a distant relative that submitted as well. That,
yeah, look, it's probably just as easy to note it, and then, but probably the same concept applies for yourself, Ross. So, we'll just note that as well.
Do I need to name the one?
Probably. Do we need to name it? Do we need to name it?
I guess in terms of full transparency.
Okay. So yes, you do.
It's Murray Cooper, and it's not. Yeah. Well, there's two Murray Coopers, but they're Murray Cooper as a role.
Correct. Okay, I understand that completely. Yeah. Thank you, Ross. So, anybody else around the table? Thank you. We've just had those detection of conflict of interest noted, and as usual, recording for today's meeting, Graham. Thank you. Is there any urgent business, councillors, that we need to attend to today? Thank you. So in front of us is a decision paper looking at the models for future delivery of water services. But before I hand over to Hamish to speak to his paper, I guess I just wanted to note the significant consideration and the guidelines inside of your agenda today. And I want to note that the two questions in front of you, A and B, that we're satisfied that we have sufficient information about the practical options, benefits, costs and impacts, and that we're satisfied that we know enough about and give adequate consideration to the views and preferences of affected and interested parties. And I just thought it was important to note that in front of that is our policy that guides us, and that consideration has been that it has been deemed significant enough, and I note the author, Hamish, that the significance was high, and I think as council we would truly support the significance categorisation that you have given this paper today. So with that, councillors, I just wanted to, I guess, take a bit of time to recall how we've got to today. And I've just made myself a few notes here, so just bear with me, but it does take us back to 2020 when central government proposed a reform on how to deliver water services. And it's my understanding that both parties, major parties within New Zealand government, have proposed looking at how services were delivered. Of course, in 2023, we joined a group of Communities for Local Democracy, which proposed an alternate reform package. And in 2025, where we are today, councils, and we are in this position right here, right now, that we must submit a water services safety plan before the 3rd of September 25. I think it's also really important to note that, you know, through this proposal, the 3 North Canterbury councils considered and received professional advice. We use the consultant Malcolm Alexander from Ewell and Alexander Consultants, who provided those financial assumptions which offered various options to us. The government policy, of course, has an overarching strategy to deliver increased efficiency, provide grant financing alongside a degree of consolidation. Of course, unfortunately, we all know that the collaboration between the 3 North Canterbury councils wasn't available to us, and so we've looked at the options that sit in front of us today, which is the third option that council has looked at, working with Kaikoura District Council and ourselves. But of course, there are 2 options available to us: the in-house business model or the joint water services CCO. Of course, both have strengths and weaknesses, but today we are charged with the responsibility to consider what we have learned, what we understand, what we've evaluated, and what we have heard or read through the submissions from our community. We've actually learned a lot as a council, along with other councillors up and down New Zealand, around what this reform means to us, and our job today is to consider Taranui District. You know, we've learnt a lot about the Preliminary Arrangement Act, which requires water services to generate sufficient revenue and to cover operations and submit a plan by the 3rd of September. We've learnt a lot about Taumata Arawai and how they will play as a water regulator with wastewater, drinking water and stormwater networks. We've also learned about the role of the Commerce Commission as an economic regulator, requiring a minimum level of service through operating expenditure, depreciation and cost for capital. The government is telling us that it expects many, if not most, to implement a joint CCO, and that those who do are well placed to secure regional deals, which is an agreement of the coalition government. We've also learned about the Department of Internal Affairs and what that means for our district and the offices of the Auditor General. They're not new to us, but they are, you know, there is a lot of things that we are burdened with as a council, as elected members, to consider the position that we're in today and the position that we anticipate for the Hiranui beyond this election cycle, and probably over the next 20 to 30 years, because that's what the reform is all about. So I just wanted us to reflect as a group of elected members. You know, we've been charged with this responsibility. It is a significant responsibility for our district, and we've learned a lot as we've gathered up information, and we're at the point today where we will consider what those best options are for the district that we're serving. So I just really, this is complex, it is challenging, and it is something that we understand from a council, from our elected representatives of our district. We understand, you know, the burden, if you like, of the decision that we're making today on behalf of our district. So I just really wanted to thank you all for the intent that you have brought to this discussion over that long period of time, and the consideration that we will have in receiving the written submissions later in this report. But I wanted to start the discussion today with that. Hamish, I am going to hand it over to you now and ask us, we'll just work this through in our usual procedure. I'll ask you to speak to your report, And then we'll take through questions and planning to work through page by page to the submissions that we have received. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Murray noted, we think this is an issue of high significance, and it's probably one of the most significant issues that we've actually dealt with in my time at this council. The only other comparable situation, I think, was in 2015, when once again we were dealing with water, and we moved in a long-term plan that allowed us to comprehensively deal with water, particularly with Prodesign compliance. And you'll probably all know that long-term thinking resulted in us getting a significant award from the WEA for that whole program for 2015. So you know, that's the only other item that I can think of that nears this in significance. So the purpose is for you to consider the written and oral submissions received during consultation, and you should have your submission packs with you. You have 53 written submissions, and 6 who wish to speak to those submissions that you've heard. So of the recommendations 1 to 3 are really about those submissions. So number 1, heard the oral submissions. Number 2, the late submission, which was received on 22nd of April, and number 3, that you receive those submissions and deliberate on them. So I guess that's the next stage of the process, Murray, that you actually go through those submissions, that you do your page 2 and you look at those submissions. I'm not going to go through the statistics of the number of submissions, because I always tell you that you don't really look at the number, that's actually what people say that's important. So I think if I hand over to you, Murray, and you want to do that page 2,
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Hamish. So before I do the page 10, I would like to look at receiving in the officer recommendation that we heard the oral submissions. So we did that on the 29th of April. We had those 6 submitters, that we agreed to accept the 1 late submission that was received on the 22nd of April, and that the oral and written submission be received and deliberated on. So I think if we split the recommendation out and I receive a mover and seconder of those first 3, and then we can do the page 2. Are you happy to move that? Thank you. Tom, you're happy to second? If there's no further questions around that, all in agreement to that, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That motion is carried. Thank you. So what I propose we do now is your submission pack that you've got in front of you. And if we just go page turn, and perhaps I don't expect everybody to comment. I mean, there'll be many things that you will be just note what the submitter has highlighted, or the highlights that you might have noted, and we will perhaps you'll jot those down, and we can use those factors to deliberate and get a decision. So if I ask you to turn to page 1, the submission from Alec Baxter, and he has submitted to the in-house business model, but I guess the theme that I noted from Alec is that not convinced that the amalgamation would bring about savings, and that is, you know, local staff are always developing skills and knowledge. So is there any other points that you might have noted that is important that come through for you from Alec? Okay, you're happy to move on? Thank you. The next submission is on page 3, and that's has been received from Nikki Beardsley. She was concerned about the lack of information on either of the proposals. Hasn't given strong direction either one way or the other. So I'm not sure whether anybody wants to comment on that. Is there anything that jumped out for you with Nikki's? Nothing? Okay, happy with that, thank you. You'll just factor all of this in when you make your decision later. The next one is on page 4 from Mr. Booth, seeking preferred option 2. And he picked out some waters management, looking at healthy fish habitat, and water for vineyards and such like, water restrictions, which is probably just outside the brief of this discussion. But is there anything else that councillors have noted there? Thank you. Next submission is from Kathy Bisman on page 6 and 7. Her preferred option is number 1, the joint water services CCO, and really looking from a futuristic perspective, considering future options, joining with KDC. Both districts are similar, smaller settlements, and have been through an earthquake together. I guess that's some emergency management sort of comes into that as well. But is there any other comments people would like to make? Right at this point, guys. Next one is Marty Black. So his preferred option is joint number 1. We heard from Marty back 29th, I think it was, and his reasons were around better security and strengths with compliance and government requirements. Is there any other comments you would like to make there, councillors? Happy? Thank you. Next on page 10 from Catherine Clymer, option 1, and that was her theme was around recognising the potential of working stronger together. Is there any other comments that you'd like to make? Thank you. On page 12 from Murray Cooper, and he is option 2, submission against amalgamation with Kaikoura, and I noted that he talked about not wanting to dilute the assets from a district perspective. So any other comment there, councillors? Next one was on page 13 from Twitter. It's neither for nor against, and I guess they spoke about insufficient information, I guess, to make that decision. So he submitted neither for nor against. Any other comments, councillors? Page 14 from Jane Demeter. She's looking at option 2. She noted the Castalia report, the impression about looking for headroom for HDC, supported retaining control at HDC as an internal business unit, sharing services is still not an option regardless of business structure, support the internal business unit with shared service with neighbouring councils as appropriate. So that's something slightly different that she's brought into her submission. So any further comments that any of you have got? Thank you. Page 15, Glenn Dunseith, looking at option 2, the in-house business unit. She spoke about ratepayers need to understand the long-term associated costs. Subdivision development must be required to increasing water capacity, and through development contributions or council planning. So probably bringing in some other aspects that are not purely related to the local water done well, but we'll note that anyway. Any other comments? 17, Di Officer and Stephen Ellis, their preferred option is number 1. Points that I picked out, but I'm happy to hear from the rest of you as well that he noted, or they noted, that it's useful and beneficial to utilise staff resources and technologies. He also noted that KDC has got relatively new infrastructure. Is there any further comments that you would like to make? Go. Page 19, from Phoebe Peel. She preferred option number 1, citing lower charges, efficiencies. She did also note, though, the quality of the board was important, so the skill-based board is something that Phoebe Field had noticed. Is there any other comments that councillors would like to make? Page 21 from Bruce and Person of Cricket. And there's a comment here that we have his name disclosed, that option elect members in the management. I've got a circle around it on 1. Is that what everybody else has said? Is that correct? Yeah. Right. So option 1 is their preference, but noting that elected members be in the governance of the board. Yeah, thank you. Page 23, Mr. Giffins, option number 1, and really cited that economy of scale for 2 councils sees that as both districts would be, it would be an advantage for both districts. So I'm not sure whether there's other comments that you'd like to make. Page 25, James Graham, option number 2, in-house business unit, and his statement, his reasons was really it's not fiscally prudent to make that decision and to alter it in order. His preference would be with the in-house business unit. On page 27, Hamish and Mary Hartnell, and it was quite clear keeping the project in-house could be an expensive project. And be in debt before you start. Also talked about some stormwater management. And that's really, but his option would be the in-house business unit. Anything else? Thank you, Vince.
But just saying, sorry, just saying that it's the first person that's asked about stormwater. So we need to be clear what happens with stormwater. Really.
So you'll just keep that in your mind as far as when we get to, consider the whole suite of information. But thank you for raising that. Is there any other councillors with anything else to add? Page 29, Diana Hawkins, looking at option 1. Read the Castalia report, supportive of them. She's not actually a ratepayer in the Hiranui district, but located in the Waimakariri, but Hiranui supplies water by the Ashley scheme. And yeah, there's some issues that she's brought up there that like Hiranui was potable water, the septic tank system. So there's some other issues that are coming into her submission that are probably relative, but not in regard to the decision making in front of us today. But is there any other comments that councillors would like to make? Robbie? Thank you.
Yes, I just thought she brought up some probably unforeseen circumstances initially, which you have to work through. That was all a couple of things that we probably had. Yeah, and there'll be things.
I guess for issues that have been brought up, Hamish, today that are sitting outside this decision making, we'll be able to pick them up at a later date, do you think? So your officers will do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Page 31, we've got option 2 from Sylvia Kendricks, and ownership and control over finances and the reasoning, partnering with Waipora and partnering with Ngaitahu. So that's probably not quite in the brief as well, but any comments that councillors would like to make? Page 33, the Hopkins in-house business unit. And the reasons that he stated is a duplication of management directors. Anything else from councillors there? Thank you. Page 35, we heard from Judith Huey. Option 2, in-house business unit, and there's some extensive reasonings there, but really about water services not being privatised. Does other councillors have anything that they've noted in that that submission that they would like to have noted here in the minutes?
Just that she noted perhaps a separate organisation may mean higher costs in regards to directors' fees and meetings, etc.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. Page 37, we have a submission from Gary Jackson. Gary talked about noted in number 4, council only undertake, it's not a public preference approach on limited information, individual views. So I guess he's highlighting to us that, you know, it's not the number of submissions, it's actually the quality of the submissions or the intent of the submissions. So I think he was also perhaps questioning what are other councils doing as far as ring fence, you know, what are the numbers with our neighbouring councils, I guess. Thank you, Vanessa.
Chair, Hamish, Jackson. Gary asked the question as to whether the ring fencing model would have any similarities to our current structure under the proposed board committee. Would you envisage it would operate in the same manner?
That would be up to the council to decide how it worked, but currently there is significant ring fencing of the financials for water. With that ring fencing is robust enough to meet the requirements of the Commerce Commission. I'm not sure, but we have an in-house business unit that was Roding, for example, that has a similar ring fencing model. So
So it wouldn't require a separate governance body?
not necessarily, unless council wanted to have separate governance for it.
Robbie, have you found something that you'd like
Yeah,
to know?
yeah, I thought it was, Gary also mentioned, you know, around local government New Zealand's view, you know, it's different up and down the country, that's why these groups are going to form as they will. But yeah, I don't know if we get feedback there. The other thing I thought was quite important, Gary had mentioned, all these submissions that are roughly 50-50, there's emotion comes into it, there's history comes into all sorts of things, and I think he sort of just highlighted the need for us as council to really get into the numbers and the facts and figures and you know, to be able to make a decision.
I guess, Karen?
I was going to agree with that actually, Robbie. I think that for me, Gary raised a lot of really good points about things that we as councillors will be mindful of in going through our deliberations, I guess. And one of the things I picked up on is he also mentions what the trends might be that are evolving in terms of other councils and what they're doing. I mean, I'm aware that when we were working on our proposal to take out for consultation, we were quite early on in the piece and we had access to people who gave us, you know, good information, if you like, at that time. But I would be really interested in getting a more updated view on some of the aspects that Gary raises here, because I feel like things may have shifted or evolved since we first settled on what we've taken out to people at this time. So it's sort of like we went through our process probably in the timeline quite early, and our consultations, you know, gone forward, and we're now coming toward needing to make a decision, but other people's journeys been happening at the same time, and I'd quite like to get a better understanding of the state of play now. both in terms of what other councils might be doing, but also whether the government's view may have shifted or whether there have been other signals coming through, or as Gary mentions, whether LGNZ are picking up things that, you know, might also inform our decision making. So those were some of the points I took out of Gary's submission.
Thank you.
So I'll start with what other councils are doing, of course, remembering that we're all doing this at a similar time, so different councils are at different stages. But Christchurch City Council have decided to go alone with an in-house ring fence business unit. Our friends at Waimakariri, I don't know whether they've made their final decision yet. I think they have.
I'm not sure. to
But
be
they're
honest.
also
Yeah.
getting down that ring fenced in-house business unit track. Selwyn District Council has decided to set up a single council CCO. Timaru District Council is working with Mackenzie District Council on a joint CCO. Waimati District Council seem to be going alone. I'm not quite sure, but I suspect they'll be going for an in-house ring fence model. Ashburton going alone with an in-house ring fence business unit, I think. Waitaki are working with Gore, Central Otago and Clutha on a joint CCO model. So that covers off the Canterbury councils. Leeds City seem to be going alone, and I think I don't think they've made a final decision yet, so
East Coast collaborating, I think. My understanding,
West Coast are talking to each other and looking at some sort of joined up model. Albra's going alone. I'm not sure whether they're CCO or not. Tasman appears to be going alone at the stage, and I'm not sure whether they're the CCO. And Nelson City looks like they'll be going alone as well. They're side aren't joining up with them. So North Island, there's varying degrees of Wellington water type models, but whether Wellington City's in that Wellington type water model or out, seems to be a conjecture at the moment. Not so close to those councils, but certainly the Wairarapa councils and Tararua are proposing a joined up model. The Hawke's Bay councils are working together again. So that's Central Hawke's Bay, Napier, Hastings, and I'm not sure whether Wairoa's in around that one at the moment.
I think Wairoa might be doing in-house business. Yeah, but that's only socialised conversation more than anything, so I don't really know.
I'm not too sure what's happening in the Bay of Plenty with Rotorua and West Bays, Tauranga, but I think Tauranga is going alone, but I'm not, don't quote me on that one. In the Waikato, there's a loose alliance of about 7 councils, but 2 of them are definitely consulting on a others during a later date. Auckland City Council is covered by Watercare, and I don't know.
No, it's not been for a long time.
Taranaki is the area that I missed out, I think, and Taranaki are trying to work together all 3 councils, but I'm not sure the status of where they're up to at the moment.
So just to follow up on the other point, do we know if LGNZ has formed any view or given any guidelines or consideration?
I've not seen anything from LGNZ. They're leaving it up to individual councils because there's a whole disparity of views amongst its members.
Yeah. Right. Vince and Vanessa, you were in, it was in November last year, wasn't it, when they had the presentation from the Commerce Commission? Was there anything that you remember? I didn't go to the other day because of the weather, but yeah, is there anything you can recall from those notes or those presentations that might give some guidance to LGNZ position?
Through chair, I know that LGNZ have made a submission. which is on the website. Just, they do have some concerns around it. One of them is related to there seems to be a disparity between the legislative framework around bill in comparison to your typical CCO structure. Hamish will be able to provide in detail about that later. That's one point that sort of stood out to me, that they have made submissions that would be
Sorry, I'm trying to get it. Tom, you want to add anything to that? Tom?
Sorry, I didn't get time managed to take a note of Hamish, all the comments you made, but it sounded to me as if the majority of councils are going it alone rather than joining up. Would that be a fair summation?
In Canterbury, it's quite evenly split.
Yeah, I haven't actually totted up the numbers, Tom, but my view is it'll be relatively even, the numbers, but I haven't totted them up, so.
Could I just extend them? Is that the bigger councils rather than the smaller councils seem to be doing that?
So if you look at them in order of size, the big guys tend to be going alone. So Auckland, Christchurch, Tauranga, I think, and then Hamilton, I think, might be an exception to that. I think they might be joining up with other neighbours in Waikato, but I'm not 100% sure. So, yeah, certainly looks like some of the bigger guys are saying too big to fail, maybe. I don't know what they're saying, but certainly that they aren't going to join up.
I guess I know through in Canterbury we've got Waimakariri, Christchurch City, Ashburton. Just to have a comparison, you've got Timaru, who is looking to have a joint CCO with Mackenzie. And Selwyn have got a single CCO, so it's a little bit separate again, different again. So that's just looking at Canterbury councils.
Selwyn voted 65, didn't it? It was a pretty close voting, so.
Yes, it was, correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay.
Thanks, if I can through the chair, Hamish. So, you know, we've all been party to the Castalia report, as have our constituents, and that's fairly high level projections. And Gary, in his submission, he talks about like clearer details in regards to cost efficiencies and costs across governance and operations and our own debt profiles. I guess at a more specific level than those, you know, high level projections that we have in Castalia. And I understand those high level projections, but I guess I wonder, is there any scope for those sorts of projections that Gary's talking about in his submission? Those almost, not necessarily line by line, because he does mention that, but just more specific.
So all projections are based on assumptions, and you either make assumptions at quite a wide level and say these are the assumptions, or you make your assumptions at a line by line level and go through every line and say these are the assumptions. And if you measure the level of uncertainty on every assumption that you make, someone that's better statistically minded than me can describe the effect of that. But essentially, the level of potential error gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you add those assumptions together. So, you know, there is a lot of assumptions in these things. Castalia are a really experienced company internationally at doing this sort of modelling work, and so they've done it based on their knowledge of the way these things roll. I don't think we're going to get better advice.
So we are continuing to go through the submission. So is there anything more in Gary's submission that you would like to bring to the table?
Question through the chair for clarification. Are we deliberating as we go, or are we going to read through the submissions and then deliberate? What's the
Going
process?
to deliberate. I want to go through all the submissions so that we fairly and honestly have, you've come prepared and read, but I want to make sure that we've gone through them all. If there's anything there, we can put it in on the table and then we'll deliberate from it. Okay? Happy, is everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
That's the intention, so that we give true value to the submissions. Thank you. We'll move on to page 41. We have a submission from Derek Johns. He is in support of option 1, which is the joint with CCO, and I guess his preferences stated around 2 large areas, 2 small populations, but duplication of service and cost to provide efficiencies is what he cited as his governing statement. Is there anything else that people have read into that you want to put onto the table? Thank you. The next one was from Bede Kearney, who also supports option 1. And his reasons, I thought this was interesting actually, around deficits from political focus with minimising rates and conflicting demand for other services that council provides, and that longer term needs for infrastructure gets kicked down the road, sweating the assets, and that a CCO model provides a better way of achieving, specific around the infrastructure that the CCO would be going to manage. He was talking about. Is there anything else there? Robbie, comment?
Yeah, this one resonated with me because the guy was looking at it through a different lens. He's got quite a different focus on the political side.
Yeah.
And I found myself sort of nodding as I went, agreeing as I went through about the election cycle and around the tug of war between rates increases and the work we do. So I thought we went through before.
Yeah, with that, Robbie, I thought it brought in a different perspective, which made me actually think about the work that we've been doing and continue to do, but the tension that brings as well. Anything else, councillors? Thank you. Next one on page 45 is has been received by Ben Keeps. His option is option 1. He believes that a CCO is a logical pathway forward, has the ability for stronger governance and operational talent, and can leverage economies of scale. Retain ownership of the assets from a structural perspective. And he also commended council for having the foresight and courage to pursue the CCO option. Do you have any comments that you've read into that submission, council?
I just picked up on his point that he said that the joint water services CCO was the least worst viable option.
Yeah.
And that ideally, it's sort of subscale, and that made me think that really, for instance, if Waimakariri joined us, as we were thinking may happen, that would make it more attractive.
Correct.
Rather, and I sort of took it that he was saying it's sort of barely over the line with just the 2 of us as smaller councils. That was my reading of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought he made a good point.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you, Karen, for contributing that. Page 47, we have a submission from Wendy Knight. Their option is round 2. Water Services Business Unit. Oh yeah, she must have come to one of the sessions and heard that information, but her preference was there's no really other guidance of why, but that was her take of the information that she received, which is fine. Great. 2, we agree with the directorship and the assets and the the borrowing capability of up to 500%. There's quite a lot in there about directorship, but is there anything else that you've noted, councillors?
Just, we need to clear up, so we have a clear answer to who, where the liability falls if, as the submitter thinks, turned to custody. So that's on the council, isn't it?
Yeah, so it depends what you mean by transfer custody, but if you're meaning if the CCO fails, financially fails, what happens there? And I guess that isn't a good example of that happening in New Zealand, but essentially, my view is that the assets would be returned to the community, whatever state they're in, and that might be through the council or it might be through the government creating some other vehicle to do that. The role of the Commerce Commission, though, in setting pricing is that these entities don't fail, that they are sufficiently funded to keep doing what they're doing.
Supplementary question, so that any debt that would come back to the council, would that the liabilities would come back to
If
here?
that happened, but remember that the role of the Commerce Commission in pricing is to ensure that the entity is earning enough money to pay for its debt, that it has sufficient cover for its debt.
Because this model is the same as a mines company's, really, isn't it?
And I think that came through clearly in the presentation with the Commerce Commission, that their role is to ensure that there is sufficient revenue coming in to manage the capex or the operational expenditure going out, and that's part of their of the role of the Commerce Commission to consider that is actually happening. So, you know, going up, so to speak, you know, should.
So there's no price control, really.
Well, yeah, can't answer, but no, you know.
Yeah, the Commerce Commission provides that price control.
Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Whatever the model entity is.
Thank you, that was the question I was going to ask.
Oh, comment? Oh, sorry, Robbie. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, there's a common thread through quite a few of the submissions around the debt, about the concern that the council has a debt. If we give it to a CCO, they can loan even more, that there's more debt, but still the same amount of ratepayers. And I guess it comes down to, you know, that debt, what period they've been paid back over. But that's something we probably need to address, is that perception around, you know, are we just doubling up with that continually growing debt? How does that one work? Because we're not throwing ratepayers.
Yeah. So I think you need to hold on to that thought when we actually. Yes.
Provide a brief comment on
Okay.
that. We have considerable debt on our water assets, our 3 water assets already. Jace, the current amount of that debt?
About 62 million.
And what's that as a percentage of the revenue from those assets?
It's very close to the 500% already.
So that not going to be a huge change in that regard. The other thing is the council's debt ceiling will be lower. So I don't think for this council that there's any great changes there. The benefit of the extra borrowing will actually sit against the Kaikoura assets, which are largely unencumbered with debt. And so the organisation as a whole, which is both sets of assets, not the assets which are already highly encumbered.
Thanks, Tom. Yep.
So the debt ceiling on the water is very close to the 500%. The remaining debt that we have, what percentage of that, how close are we to the debt ceiling of that, and what measures are we going to take to make sure that we don't reach that debt ceiling and that we don't take advantage of having much lower debts much lower debt repayments and interest charges to make sure that we don't see them both going up.
I'll leave Jace to answer the percentage question, but I'll deal with the rest of it.
Well, currently, in the draft annual plan that we're consulting on at the moment, predicts a debt to revenue ratio at the end of June 26, inclusive of water at the minute, at just over 100%. So removing water from the numbers currently would probably, and I haven't done the full analysis out 10 years, but it would probably come in around about 70%. Yeah, but we still do have our debt ceiling set at the 175% that's dictated by LGFA. The issue we will face moving forward retaining water is that we will exceed the 175% because even in the current annual plan, the current long-term plan was predicting us to not breach, but very close to the 175% in year 3 and 4 of the long-term plan. That was on the basis of the level of rates being higher because of the higher roading program. Now, as we've pulled back the roading program, the level of revenue will be significantly lower, which means, yeah, we'll be closer to breaching that debt ceiling. Well, not only our self-imposed debt ceiling, but the LGFA debt ceiling, which would require the council to obtain a credit rating to be able to provide.
And I'll just cover off the second part of that question, Tom, about how do we make sure that we don't go over a debt ceiling. So we have the debt ceiling set by LGFA, but also we have an internal debt ceiling set by the council through our treasury policy, and it's up to the council to set that debt ceiling and then maintain their budgets within that debt ceiling, unless it makes sense for some reason to change that. And for a long time here, we ran a debt ceiling of 100%. And we only made decisions to change that as we moved into the capital phase of doing the upgrades to provide that protozoal compliance on water. So we very successfully ran with that internal debt ceiling for a very long time.
Supplementary to that, again, Jason, I wonder if, particularly as we're working on the annual plan at the moment, whether we actually could reasonably conveniently, reasonably easily separate the two cost entities so that we have water on one hand and the remainder on the other, so that we can actually see over the annual plan, but also over the long-term plan, what is likely to happen to both sort of, well, certainly the non-water, what is that likely to happen over the next 9 years? Would that be relatively not too difficult? I know.
Certainly the next step to take to see what it looks like, depending on the decisions made. I suppose the problem we always have is that with the annual plan, we're just looking at a snapshot of 1 year rather than following through for the remainder of the long-term plan. So there will be a little bit of work involved in achieving that. To do it now perhaps is a...
Not now, no, I don't mean now, but it's just be mindful of that, because I would certainly like to look at that over the remainder of the long-term plan to see how it's tracking, what effect it will have, what effect will have on it on lower interest rates, because the interest rates that we would have been paying for Three Waters will no longer be coming out. So presumably our repayments will be considerably lower, our interest payments will be considerably lower. Dare I say, we might even reduce the debt.
Can I just ask a question that's kind of related through the chair?
Yeah.
Okay. Just in regards to the, you know, hitting that debt ceiling, and we've talked about, you know, the need for a credit rating. Have we started that process? I'm sure we talked about.
Well, yeah, we started the process, well, we do have a live action point from council to receive the credit rating. There is a cost involved, and that cost is around $60,000 plus an awful lot of internal staff time. So until we know who we're going with.
Probably indicative of this decision.
Yes, and I understand that. I just wanted to just check that they were working in parallel with this decision.
Certainly that was the context, isn't it, really, you know? Yeah.
And there are benefits of having a credit rating at certain levels, that there is a slight reduction in the credit margin that our GFA charges, but it's always on the basis that you need in excess of 60 to 70 million of new debt to be able to see the financial benefit from it.
Thank you.
So it'd be good to just carry on through these pages so that we've given due diligence to the submissions. So I can just ask you to continue on page 51, and we have a submission from Barry Lacombe. His preferred option is number 2, which is the in-house model, and his preference really is around staying within the HDC. He sees no benefit in joining KDC. That's probably his relatively succinct theme. Happy with that, councillors? We'll move on. We have one from Diane Lacombe, also suggesting option 2, and really just citing not a preference for us to join with any other district really. So is there any other comment that you'd like to make? Anything that you read differently to that one? Thank you. Next submission on page 55 is from Paula Lacombe, preferred option number 2, not supporting Kaikoura. HDC is well positioned with the work that's already been done, particularly she's citing drinking water. Don't see any economy and scale in combining with Kaikoura. Talk about the Waimakariri option, but that's obviously not an option for us. And other commentary was around directorship and layers of management. Really just skimmed across that. Is there any other comments that you've picked up, councillors, that in your reading that I've missed? Happy? Thank you. Gordon Legge, I think we heard from Mr. Legge, and he talked about his preferred option is option 2, the in-house unit, and sees no tangible benefit to ratepayers. Any other comments that you want to just pull forward, councillors? Okay. Maura Smith. Looking at create further debt, establishment of a new water services not 100% owned by councils. Yeah, there's quite a bit in there, but is there anything of value that you want to highlight, councillors, in your read of the submission? Okay, next one is on page 61, which is from Mr. Alistair Melton. Third option is option 1, and his reasons were around spreading some of the overhead costs, least chance of central government saying we're not changing enough. He also stated that he would prefer the WIMAC, but understanding that's not an option to us. How we're positioned to change in the future, and strongly suggest we would look at that. So it seems reasonably reasoned as well. But any other comments that you'd like to make? Okay, page 63 from Nell McCullough. And through that conversation, you'll see there's option 2. If you want to make comment on anything else there, councillors? Next one on 65 is from Sally McKenzie. Talks about taking pressure off council funding, benefit from the reform, provide more expertise and special skills, and her option is looking at option number 1. Is there anything more that I've missed? I've just skimmed over that in my read of it. I picked up all the salient points. Sharon Michelle, option 1, independent board, borrow more, increases of water rates, HDC cages to retain and pay for their own infrastructure. So she seems to understand the separation of those assets as well, which is helpful. Anything you want to add? Page 69, Philip Murphy, option number 1. His reasons he liked the thought that ownership of the infrastructure would remain with the local council. Any other comments? Page 71. Oh, sorry, Robbie, did you have your hand up?
Oh, no, just
Sorry.
more of a comment, and it's come through on several of them, and it's almost just the rainbows we, but we get talk about we want to stay with council because we know the complexities and we've got the skills, and then the other half will say, well, we'll get a new board and they'll have all the expertise and the skills. Yeah, when the whole country's going to be out there looking for the same people, it's got to be borne in mind. I think that we're not just sort of thinking, well, if you take that option, there'll be a sudden lineup of gurus in the field. I think they're overlooking the so yeah, it's interesting people's perception of that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as I said, it started today. This is hugely complex. Yeah. And we don't take away, we don't step away from that at the moment, actually. Yeah, thank you. So I'll just go back to page 71 and Mr. Nicol and look at his good option as 1. Control over local waterways remains in local governments. So he saw that that local board was actually going to provide that. Is there any other comments that you've made in your reading of that, councillor? Barry Nunn, I think we heard from him. He spoke to his submission and he looked at option 2. I'm not going to go through that. We heard him last week, the week before. Is there anything that you want to highlight in that submission again today?
Madam Mayor, I also note that Barry Nunn sent a follow-up email following his submission, what he said about complexity in the submission that was circulated.
Yeah, everybody want to receive that? Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Anything else you want to add there, councillors? Page 76, Team Preston, option number 2, in-house unit, and the reasons around it was hopefully that would be more cost effective. So on page 78, Ushka Saunders and Timothy Saunders. Anyway, looking at option 1, CCO would provide quality water services to communities at large. Then, yeah, options to be able to enable that. She also seemed to understand the financial situation and ensure continuing adequate and appropriate services to council. So is there anything else you want to add? Page 80 from Nancy Stanley, option 2. And that in-house business unit and for HDC to give more consideration to that option. Anything else you want to add? Page 82, Brody Stevens. 2, less debt, more control, revenue is unlikely to grow. So that's reasonably clear as well. Anything you want to add, councillors? Takes us to page 84, which is the submission from Tūtahiri Runanga. They don't give a preference one way or the other. And provide us with some insights from their concerns around the priorities for water services within the region, probably outside of this mandate. But I'm not sure whether there's anything else that you'd like to contribute there, councillors, anything that you want to do?
I'll just really comment that they've made clear and consistently have made clear that they prefer a takiwā approach.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Thanks, Karen.
Yes, I think it was made clear, number 6, on page 85 there, they're talking about the fact that reforms themselves, in their view, are flawed and short-sighted, and of course we don't have the luxury of not being engaged with it. You know, we're sort of compelled to work within the rules that we've been given by this government. And I guess the other thing that they are saying quite clearly is that they want to be able to exercise rangatiratanga on their water. And you know, the current framework, I guess, doesn't really enable that easily. And you know, that I think they probably make the point that we, you know, haven't directly engaged with them prior to, you know, reaching the view that we have, that we're now consulting on. It's more not in the depth that they were probably looking for. So, I mean, I think they made their position really clear, and I found it really helpful to read that.
Tom, and then I will. Oh, right. Thanks. Good. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, point number 3, that the water across our area is in crisis. I would certainly think that we should be looking at those claims and looking for evidence of those claims to see A, whether they're justified, and B, you know, what are we going to do about it if that claim is valid.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is one of the submissions that might have further conversation outside of this discussion and this decision, right? That was my take on it, really. I was pleased and delighted that we actually received this submission, because that's shows some meaning to the that we've been anticipating to build that relationship, to actually have the conversation in the first place. So I mean, that in itself is a positive aspect. So I think I come to you, Rob. Are you happy with that?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, I just picked on point number 7, where Ngā Tahu pointed out that go with the Kaikoura CCO, that they perhaps feel that they were, say, not quite visible, but I think they felt that the question was raised about that, and I guess that in turn raises, in their mind, what role Kaikoura would have. So yeah, I just thought that was something that we'll have to tease out somewhere along the line.
Yes, I mean, it's always a work on. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to clarify, item 5 there, we have no outfalls or sea outfalls to it.
Well, thank you.
I'll just draw the council's attention to point 9 as well in the.
Okay, any other, I mean, it's just good, the process of working through these papers is to just flesh out anything that you want to flesh out, so that we all have a you know, clear understanding. So we'll move on to page 87, and that is from New Zealand Te Whatuora. They also don't have a preferred option, but they have huge interest, I guess, in how safe water is delivered across our district. So is there anything from your reading, councillors, that you would just like to highlight in this part of this discussion part of the process? Thanks, Tom.
It's just to reaffirm the point 6, the number of people who were contaminated in neighbourhood. It focuses on why we must ensure that our water supplies are the highest quality that we can have.
And I guess what they're talking about there is the reason that this reform was the beginning of the process, really. Okay, you're happy to move on, councillors? Page 90. Shona Tremendek. And they talk about their preferred option, option number 1. The consideration is around potential savings. They also talk about it from a local perspective around Hanmer Springs and water restrictions and space around there, sort of that holiday season time. But is there anything else you want to, thinking about it from a decision we've got in front of us today, is there anything more you want to add, councillors? If not, we'll move on. Page 92 to Hamish Trolove. Preferred option is number 1. Protections against the water service organisation ever being sold. How will tariffs be set in relate to properties who are harvesting rainwater? So that's probably in line with some of the discussions we had at the strategy meeting this morning around water collection, rainwater collection. So yeah, there's some theme there. Anything else, councillors? We'll move on to page 94, which is Hugh Turnbull. He prefers number 1. Water service will run an efficient way, appropriate technical qualified businesses. Setting up the CCO, he talks about the cost to set up a CCO, I think. And HDC potentially losing approximate percentage of our rating revenue, which is good to see that a submitter actually recognised that there will be some change in our overall context of how we receive and deliver services. I thought that was quite a useful commentary. He talked about the board and no councillors on the board, so he was obviously happy for a skill-based board. Is there any other comments that you want to pick up there, councillors?
Probably that he was one of the few that's really thought about when the water's taken from council, if it goes out,
Yeah.
what's left, what do they do?
Yeah, I think so
And
too.
that is a
I mean,
big part of the question.
yeah, that's right. I think it was quite well thought through in his submission, to be fair. Thank you. If we move on to page 96, from Susan Turnbull, supporting option 1. Really that's looking at, central government indicating change. And she's looking, hopefully it will reduce costs by sharing with Kaikoura, because her basis around that. Anything else? Page 97, we've got your land Turnbull, one option. The commentary was around a CCO run more efficiently than an in-house. And the core function of CCO's water and no overlapping with other parts of the business. No councillors or community board members to be appointed, so she's quite clear in her expectation around the governance part of it. Happy to move on. We've heard Louise Webb spoke to her submission. Her preferred position was option 1. You had a chance to question her a couple of weeks ago, but is there anything more that you want to add from what you've read on her submission for today? Yeah.
I do have one from the previous, or just a comment from the previous one though. I'm sorry, I didn't get your hand up quick enough before you checked it out. I think it's worth noting there's been some questions from a number of people, not only in this submission, about how much of the data they'll see, you know, the visibility, the transparency of what's going on with reporting back from the WSCCO services, so that would be something for them to understand, I think.
So we'll just, I think that's sort of, when we discuss and deliberate, I think it'll be worthwhile, thank you. So yeah, oh, sorry, Robbie.
I just thought, well, Fiona's taken it back, right? I'll
Yeah.
jump in
Yeah,
there.
go for it.
We talk about the efficiencies of not overlapping. We've also got to bear in mind that the efficiencies that we do have by being able to overlap with their executive and through their top level staff, you know, wearing more than one hat and doing more than one job is often how we are, saying having efficiencies. So that'll be an interesting one to think about.
Anyway, we're happy to move on. We'll go over to page 101 and we'll go on the Whitakers. Is option 2. There's a lot of discussion there about the Castalia information, and she strongly recommended council go to forensic accountant or something to examine the costs. So I guess that's in relation to what she'd read in the Castalia report. So I'm not sure, is there any comments that councillors would like to make on that in that regard? Okay, we've got 103, Paul Williams, he prefers option 1, and his reasoning was around resourcing efficiency, hopefully water rates, agree to the amalgamation of the services, again, to minimise the bureaucracy and consultants to save expenditure. So he is looking at it from an efficiency perspective. Any other comments, councillors? We have one here from Mark Wilson, option 1. Really, it was interesting, his points on page 106 around CCO being disconnected from community at office and board level, needs to have a strong guidance from HTC to facilitate this. And I thought that was quite good insight actually, and the formation of a community engagement would be essential. So I just thought that actually related well to how we can continue to be influential as a council should, you know, we need CCO space. So I felt that that's quite a valid comment. Any other anything else I want to add there, guys? So that we've given agreed to accept that late submission, and that's from Peter Vink, and that's on the last page of your pack. His preferred option is option 1, and really stating that joining with KDC makes sense, increases the ratepayer base, investment across a wider range. So that was really the intent of his submission. Is there any other comments around that?
Yeah, this was around the ratepayer base. I'm sure I'll clarify this for us. What's the water thing? I understand is we're talking about people pay water. Water tariffs pay for their business, not the amount of ratepayers necessarily. So people maybe get a little bit confused on that. Yeah, it's the ones that pay the water bills, not the ones that pay the rates bills necessarily. Do I have that right?
Yeah, people tend to use the term interchangeably, but technically it's the ratepayers that have a water connection, whether they're actually ones in the Ashley or Waikato. It's those ones, but it's more complicated than that as well, because it's ratepayers that have a sewer connection, and some ratepayers that have a water connection don't have a sewer connection, and then it's how do we pay for stormwater as well. So the stormwater thing at the moment affects all ratepayers. So Yeah, it's a complex, but people I think use the term ratepayers quite loosely in some of these.
So I think we've given sight to receiving, hearing and accepting those submissions going through, like finding out any sort of important points or that we can have a shared understanding of your thinking around the preferred option around the water services delivery plan or point or in-house. As we have discussed all the way along, I'm conscious that you know, there may be some questions also that we need to tease out, and I think that it would be happy to receive any questions, any further questions to clarify that we've heard through this process, and I'm happy to receive that information or to host those questions now, and then perhaps look at having a short break and then see if we're any closer to being. So councillors, I want to see if there's any further questions that you may have on what you've heard, what you've received, or what you've got in your own minds in regard to the possible models. Thank you, Ross.
And thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just a question regarding process. And that is, if we were to go down either path, and then Kaikoura went down either path and it was opposite to what we wanted, how does that play out? If we said yes to Kaikoura, they say no to us, and vice versa, how does that play out? Or are they trumped by us if we make a decision now that doesn't include them? Do we go back on that, or is that final and then you're on your own? I just really want to know how that works.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really good question to start this process. Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a complex situation.
Yeah.
So if we say yes to the WSCCO model, we're still waiting for Kaikoura to say yes. And if we both say yes, well then obviously we go ahead with that model. If we say no, then Kaikoura is left with the only option being at the stage to go alone, unless they can put a deal together with someone else in a reasonably short time frame. And likewise, if we say,
But if we say yes and they say no,
then we're left without a partner. So,
Okay.
so we're fallback position as an in-house business unit.
okay. Even though we've agreed to it,
We've agreed that that's the preferred pathway for us. But if it's not possible, it's not possible.
okay, so we'd end up with an in-house.
Yep.
By default. Yep.
And Kaikoura are having their meeting in this regard on the 28th, so that's next Wednesday. Okay.
I do have one more question, then I think I'm probably done. But
Yeah, no, you go for your question.
just regarding, I guess some of the comments we've seen coming through, and the murmur of regional deals from central government, and I look at our water and I think, gosh, you know, we've done everything we can do that we needed to do to comply. So where's our carrot now? You know, we should be top of the class. We should be due for whatever would be due in any regional deals, because we've done it. We've done it in-house with our great staff and management. And I guess that sort of that irks me a wee bit. It's like, if we're good boys and play, be teacher's pet, we'll get more preference. And I that actually doesn't sit well with me. It's like, blimey, we've done everything you've asked of us. Where's our top of the class badge or whatever? You know, it's like, yeah, and that doesn't sit well with me. Just yeah.
So your top of the class badge is out in the smoker room.
Yeah.
It's a little
Yeah.
glass wood. That's your top of the class badge. The regional deals were set out many months ago, and one of the requirements for a regional deal is progressing the local water done well agenda, and being able to show significant progress in that regard. And so that's that was simply a bottom line in the regional deals that they put out there.
So is it a bribe if you follow our line? We'll give you this and yeah, okay. Thank you.
Come back to you. I'm gonna go to Tom and then I'll come to you, Dave. Tom?
You've just stated that the default position is if we go for one option and that doesn't come about, the default is we automatically switch over to the other option. I'm not happy with that, because if I have voted for one option and that doesn't come about, I don't think my default position should be the opposite of what I want. I think there should be another vote, because if I want a certain set of circumstances, which I've actually voted on a couple of times already, or at least made indications, to then default me to the option that I do not want, I think that that is wrong. And I think that that needs some more consideration and would actually need another vote, because without wanting to preempt the vote, I would actually be looking for more work to seek out another option rather than the option that is unpalatable to me at this moment in time.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment in that, because you're getting the opposite of what you think you want.
Exactly.
But the reality of the situation is that we have to have a water services delivery plan approved by DA, not submitted, approved by DA by the 3rd of September. In order to have another decision that's not one of the two that we've got here, we'd have to go through another whole consultation round. It all takes time, and I don't think we get across the line. So what I'm suggesting here is that we would submit a water service delivery plan to DIA based on the in-house ring fence business unit model, and if council had a desire to go out and seek another option, then we could go and do that. But our water service delivery plan that we got approved would be based on the in-house ring fence model. But that doesn't preclude us from joining up with someone else and saying, like all good plans, there's been a change here. We're now joined up with someone else or doing something else.
Yeah, because surely they must take into consideration that we have worked, as Ross says, we've had the class badge on, we've been ahead of the field, we've been going on at this, and we've been going again with this. And if it falls over at the last minute, that's actually not our fault. Surely they must take that into consideration, that we have tried our best to get a certain deal. If that falls over, we're forced into a deal that none of us, or no, I'm prejudging the vote again, but that many of us probably don't want. And I feel that regardless of the fact that it is law, it is bad law if they are forcing us into a position that we do not want. And maybe that's just a fact. Maybe I need to just make the point without actually, it isn't a question.
Yeah, I mean, it just highlights really the complexity of the issue, I guess, that we're facing. That whilst we are designing our own destiny, actually we can't design it completely, because we are we're working in an arrangement where we have an intention. The intention has always been that, for Kaikoura and Pukenui would have that be a coalition of the willing, I guess, without taking into consideration any vote that might be happening here this afternoon. But actually, that was always the intent. But we are at the judgment of two separate elected membership entities at the moment, and that's just a timing thing. But I was just going to say, Hamish, as well, like the plan that we need to submit by the 3rd of September, it's not just a plan that's going to sit on a shelf somewhere. It's actually got to have implementation of how that's going to happen and when. So it's not, this is an active plan that needs to be submitted with a scheduled time frame of events. Can you describe that more of how that might look?
No, I think your description is correct, and we'll have to agree with Kaikoura what the start-up date for the WSCCO would be if we're going down that track. We'll jointly arrange that, but I mean, we've had some rough discussions about, that being in December 2026 at this stage, although there are other potential dates we can consider, but we'll have to agree those dates with the WSCCO. We'll largely we'll work with Kaikoura for us to agree those things as we go through. But I mean, Kaikoura is at the same mercy. They're at your mercy, we're at their mercy. I mean, it's an equal risk situation. So they'll be paying due care and attention to their decision on the 28th as well, just like you are today.
We're happy with that, Tom. We'll move on to Dave. Thanks, Dave.
Being a bit careful because I have a whole lot of preconceived ideas and what I think I haven't changed my. These regional deals, say if we are still in a ring fenced rural model, isn't that sufficient enough? Maybe we don't, what are these regional deals? What do we need them if we've done everything? There's no, someone said bribery before, but what are these regional deals that, I'm just thinking, well, I do things on merit, I'm not on bloody, I'm not interested in airports. I'm interested in doing decisions based on business, not on loyalty points. So if we're ring fenced, is that not sufficient? But if you want your air points and you want your loyalty points, can't we achieve that by being a good ring fenced model? Why do we have to be in the WCCO? All right, not explained it very well, but just.
So there's some questions are really hard to answer on. It's probably one that's hard for me to answer, but I can tell you that the documentation from the government, from the Crown on regional deals says that that you've joined up with neighbouring councils to deliver water services. That's one of the fundamental lines. There's only about three fundamentals in there, and that was one of them. But I mean, regional deals are a short-term thing, right? We've got a government at the moment that's doing regional deals, and in 18 months' time, we could have a government that's got a completely different view of the world. So I think it would be foolish to make a decision simply based on regional deals. Regional deals. No one's got one yet, so we don't actually know what they look like. But essentially, they are deals that are designed to promote economic growth, housing, and infrastructure within a district, and they are to provide tools to councils and others to benefit from funding opportunities that arise through that growth.
It was an agreement. This was an agreement of this coalition government, so it's one of those. It's one of those sightings of the coalition deal, really. But Vanessa,
through the chair, further to Dave's comments or questions. When we were at the LGMP conference in Wellington in November, there was a very, very clear theme from where I sat, from Central, that the regional deals or the council mergers or getting people to talk, getting people to get together is a really feasible option to help mitigate some of the problems that councils are facing at the moment, namely economic issues. So that was a really strong theme that I picked up on.
I think that's a worthy comment. Thank you, Vanessa, for that. Yeah. Karen?
It's just, I guess going through all the submissions and the verbal ones that we have and so on, there's a few things that I still want to tease out of my mind before I'm sort of feeling able to proceed. One of them relates to liability. It's been mentioned a little bit this morning in terms of debt, but I just wanted to get clearer in my own mind about the nature and extent of liability in the context of an WSCCO for directors and in the context of in-house, I guess for councillors and CEs and so on. Could you just help me understand that better, please?
So the WCCO is a separate entity to the council. And so any liabilities incurred by that WSCCO, whether financial, health and safety, whatever, will sit in that WSCCO. Under the Health and Safety Act, it will be a PCBU, just as council is a PCBU, and it will have its own liabilities there. It will have its own financial liabilities, it will have its own debt liabilities, and it will have its own statutory liabilities under the Commerce Commission, under the Commerce Act, etc. So they will sit entirely in areas, legal, statutory, financial, health and safety liabilities, all sit there. If it's an in-house business unit, they sit here.
And so further to that, if I may, what about professional liability or indemnity and that kind of thing?
Same with that. The liabilities for the CCO sit with the CCO, and they will probably take our professional indemnity insurance just like we do, statutory indemnity insurance to cover those off. They sit with that CCO, and it's board of directors. They don't transfer through to council.
Okay, and so, is that right?
Yeah, no, keep going.
So
Tease
another
it
question.
out.
So if we have an in-house, like, ring fenced business unit, will our current, professional and public indemnity and those sorts of covers that we have in place now, will they be able to cover the in-house unit as well? Like, it's not going to be an additional cost on top.
So there may be some consideration from the insurers about the role of the Commerce Commission and potential indemnification there if that's possible. So, but essentially we carry that cover for the existing stuff, and it indemnifies councillors and staff to the maximum extent possible.
Robbie, I think I'll come to
Yeah.
you. Thanks, and Vanessa.
Two things for me. I'm presuming the initial setup costs, CCO is, not a cheap option to set up. Presumably that goes on, the debt stays with the CCO.
It's capitalised.
So we put it on their tab, basically. The other thing for me is I kind of feel we've been on this road for quite a long time now, and different options over the last few years, and with the water. And the government sort of put roadblocks here and there, where we don't want you going there, we don't want you going there, we want you going in that direction. And to me now, there's two roads left in front of us, we're at a fork in the roads. And I'm sort of thinking, well, whichever one we go through, I'm kind of, and I know I realise it's the next part of the equation or the thinking, but I sort of think, well, okay, if I turn left or right, what happens the day after that? What does council look like? What's left? How does it, that side of it, I realise that that's not immediately part of this decision, but it's going to be a direct thing the day after, and that's, I'm just sort of wondering when or how we look at that side of it, picking up the pieces, if you like, if that's the way we can put it together.
So if you're looking at 25% less of what we're doing now currently, what it would look like.
Yeah.
Do you want to
Yep.
tease that out? Thank you.
You're right. This if we go down that WSCCO track, it is a fork in the road, and it will require us to look really carefully at number one, how services will be provided to that CCO, and number two, what that leaves council looking like, and we'll have to work through that process and figure it out. But the idea is that ratepayers should not be in a worse off situation because of this decision. They should be in a better off situation.
You're happy with that, Robbie? I think we went to Vanessa and then Tom. Thanks, Vanessa.
Chair, I just want to ask about consultation, insofar as once the LTP is no longer relevant, the consultation requirements with the water services strategy and any other potential CapEx expenditure with our, or shift in our water assets, are those consultation requirements as robust as they currently need to be now under the LGA?
Claire, I'm looking at you on this one, but essentially my understanding is that we don't have to consult on these changes as part, we don't have to do a shift in the LTP. Is that you nodding?
That's correct. We still need to change the LTP if a decision is made. Things get determined if we need to audit our LTP or not, but we do not need to consult on the LTP, providing we choose one of the options we're consulting on. Right. In terms of the future WISCO, whether it has to consult, that's still being worked through.
Wondering. Thank you.
I'm still concerned about this decision that we end up in this default position through not voting for it. And it's a live public meeting. There is flexibility in the date that we have to start with CCO. As in, we've got quite a lot of time next year to do that. There's plenty of time to get all of those things in place. Why is there not more time this year that if our plans fail, that we don't have more time to renegotiate, to go and look elsewhere, to look for a regional deal, look for other councils that might be, who might consider working with us? I feel that at the one end, we've got a really, really tight deadline here. And then at the other end, well, maybe December 26, 18 months, more than 18 months time. It's like, oh, it's flexible over there, but here we're absolutely rigid. And that feels as though we're being straitjacketed into a no-win situation.
That 3rd of September deadline, if you like, has been in place for probably over 12 months or more now. That's never shifted. When we started this discussion, when we, 12 months ago probably, that 3rd of September 2025 was always the deadline. And you will remember from some of the discussions with Malcolm Alexander when we had some of that information, that the timeliness of when we went out to consult now was always going to be put a lot of pressure on getting actually the water services safety plan in place and adopted by the 3rd of September. So that deadline, that time frame has always been in place, and it's been there for a long time now. So I don't think that's changed, to be fair.
No.
Yeah.
We've got a government that will be facing an election
Yeah.
in probably November 26. They saw a previous government pretty much lose an election based on what they've done with water, amongst other things. But the incoming government said that the decisions about water had a lot to do with that government losing the election. They do not want this issue to spill over into their election period.
Yeah.
And so they've set the period about a year before their election, so that they can go onto the campaign trail and say, we dealt with water.
Yeah.
And you might think it's a cynical view, but it's my view.
But yeah.
Thank you.
The relativity is quite happy for it to sit in front of our election cycle, not central government. Dave, you've got a comment, and I want to go to Dave and then Robbie and then Vanessa. Thanks, Dave.
I think the government's given an option of a ring-fenced option, so that's a palatable option for them. Otherwise, why did they give that option? I feel like there's been a pack of cards being dealt to us, and when YMAC took their card out of the pack, it made it quite different, and different set of cards is what we're going to do. If we stay at ring fenced, we can always go as a CCO later if we found that as an option. But my question is, if we go as a CCO, it's pretty hard to unwind that and go back to a ring fence model are we not better to start a ring fence model until there's other options in the future? We're not, all the other reasons that I'll give later on, we're not throwing the baby out of the bath and doing it at times, it's just giving us time.
So CCOs can be established, they can be disestablished, and I speak from personal experience because prior to being chief executive here, I was chief executive of a CCO that was taken back in-house by the council. So it's not a particularly difficult process,
But in
first-hand experience.
But in the interim, you've thrown the fox terrier in the chook shed, caused a lot of chaos to your organisation. So, you know, that's a bit that I'll save that for later. So, you know, I just wonder until you know.
But it's different to the question you asked.
Yeah, I know. So you can unwind.
Yeah,
and
you
go
can
back.
unwind.
So thank you, Robbie, and then Vanessa, and then Elaine, thank you.
Yeah, the last government period, they had us, you know, we were running around in circles for a number of years, not quite sure which direction to go. This government now is pushing us in a particular direction. Yeah, is there any kind of indication of the cost paid or anything at all? Have we still really not got any guarantees that, you know, if there was a change of government that things would change, or is there a feeling now that they'll all be fairly, not worn out a little bit, but keen to see it put to bed, and no major changes perhaps?
So there is no cross-party agreement on this. There's a feeling that that the failure of the previous government model would not make it that palatable for a new government to go back to that model. But there's also a feeling that we need more joined up water services, we need more joined up local government. So, and I'm talking about the service delivery and not the government end, by the way, but I'm talking just about service delivery. That's the feeling that comes through politically, and you get a bit of that from both sides of the fence.
Through the chair, there is a theme with the submitters that there is a concern around cost efficiency. And from memory, the number of connections we would be looking at between the two districts would be 7,000.
7,000.
So the DIA have said that in their view that these cost efficiencies won't really kick in until we hit around 20,000. Do we have time? I know, speaking about time, is there any chance that we could come up with a few examples of those cost efficiencies on the basis of that 7,500 connections, just so we can get a bit of an understanding as to, you know, how much these efficiencies will be, whether in fact there really will be that many.
You want specific examples between now and when you make a decision?
Ideally. Probably, yes.
Okay, so if we look at scheduling of capital works and efficiency of procurement, so you have slightly greater scale of capital works, and so you would have a slight advantage in scheduling and procurement, because instead of saying, well, we're going to need 10, 25,000 litre tanks over the next 3 months, you could say we need 15 or whatever, and so you can get a slight procurement advantage potentially in that. You get a capital advantage in the way that you schedule this program, because you can move stuff backwards and forwards a little bit to deal a little bit more with your interest rates and so forth and so on. So a very small advantages, you know, and I think we talked about 1 to 2% versus the 40% I think was talked about in the previous government's model. So they're very small, but it's quite a big business. So you know, small percentages make quite a difference.
So once we balance that out with the with the overheads, well, not the overheads, but the additional costs. Where are we at? Are we, in your view?
Oh, I think that from the Castalia modelling, there was a very small price advantage to the consumers from the WSCCO model, and from memory, I think we're talking about $20 a quarter or some number like that.
And one further question subsequent to that, Jason, if we were to go down that credit rating road, remind me again, that elevates our debt ceiling to
280.
280. And it's what, roughly 50-60K to pursue that process?
That's an external cost, and that's per annum. And then there's, you know, the staff time involved.
Yeah, that's a couple of questions actually, and kind of touching on comments that have been made over here, I guess. So in regards to the conversation that Vanessa just opened up about, you know, the procurement efficiencies and efficiencies of scale, I guess. It would seem that from what you've just said and from what we know, that some of those efficiencies of scale will be outweighed by the costs to do with, you know, governance and actually setting up the CCO and whatnot. Is there anything preventing us from looking for procurement efficiencies with, let's say, if we were in the situation where an in-house ring fence, going along to someone like Waimak and saying, hey, what are you getting? You know, can we do a deal and get those efficiencies in another manner rather than needing to be, you know, a combined CCO to do that?
There's nothing that stops doing that. We haven't done it, but I mean, to be fair to our program management officer, our existing team, and they do a pretty good job of extracting efficiency out of the capital works that they can. But incremental increases in volume do bring small incremental increases in efficiency.
I guess what I'm putting out there is that I understand that, and actually the efficiencies of scale is, you know, one of the advantages that we've talked about. But if there's that alternate way of getting that efficiency of scale, then, you know, it would seem appropriate or sensible to explore that.
Yeah, and if we really wanted to maximise that efficiency and scale, then we'll join up with Christchurch City in our procurement, because their procurement is way bigger than Waimak's or ours. Or Waimak would join up with Christchurch City. But the thing is that as councils, we don't seem to be very good at joining up and doing the stuff without having some sort of model around it. I mean, we're probably one of the better councils at doing this sort of thing. And you know, if you look at what we do currently with Waimak, if you look at what we do with Takara, but as councils, we're not very good at it.
But if I mean, that's something that we could aim to become better at. My other question was around the pathway that Dave was talking about, because I mean, if we were to stay as an in-house ring fence and see what happens, that whole ability to then look and see where other CCOs are, or where other ring fences are, and to look for in timeliness, without time pressure, the right opportunity for our district. That versus the whole, you know, you said, so a CCO can be unwound, but at what cost and at what time duration? Having, I'm sorry, I'll just add to that, having committed the funding to set it up. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to.
I mean, at the most optimistic, it's a matter of months to unwind the CCO. But there's other things that you can do in the meantime, simply like taking the services in-house and let the CCO wind itself up, for example. So there's things that you can do there. And of course, the CCO could go into liquidation because it loses the contract because it's lost its mandate to do the work essentially. So there's things you can do there. But I mean, if we're going into it with a view to winding up the CCO, then we shouldn't do it. My advice.
I think we have to explore the opportunities of being in and then out. I mean, it would be silly not to understand that before we commit.
Yes. But and yes, it's I think going back to your earlier question, it's entirely feasible to stay in-house and still explore opportunities to join up with someone else. I just wonder how other people would look at us. We've already had a crack at this and basically fallen the last hurdle.
Sorry, can I ask one more question? Or it's just a thought that's in my head actually, about decision making, and this is, as we're all really aware, this is really significant, and we have this decision sitting in front of us, and it feels to me like there's an intent to make this decision today. But I guess my question is, we have a council meeting on the 27th of May, which is still before Kaikoura make their decision. Is there that pressure to make that decision today, or do we just have that time to just think on it? After having, as a group, delved into the submissions in depth, which is what we've done today and are still doing.
Karen and then Dave, but I'll just ask a question before that. Hamish, we've always gone into this process with our eyes wide open, and the consideration that a joint CCO, consulted with that is the preferred option. And one of the reasons around that was to consider our debt situation and the pressure that council, and we all understand, as you do, that the debt still sits with our ratepayers regardless of which envelope they get in the mail. But actually, I'm also really concerned about our future capital expenditure from a council perspective for other parts of our business, and we've always talked about our bridge replacement over the next 10 years. Can I just have, can we just have that as part of this decision-making capacity, is actually what pressures would that, if we chose not to consider our preferred option as the best option going forward, what would be the implications of other CapEx, considering our debt ceiling will be sitting right on top of us? Because that's part of the consideration we've had to get to this point.
So we'll breach our debt ceiling in about 3 years, but we can get a rating, which will take us to 225%. 225 will give us an extra
280. Do stuff in my head.
It's about half a year, essentially. So it would, so 175% on our total revenue at the moment is
and it's 60 grand a year to get a credit rating
80
year on year.
80 something million, so that'd take us to around 100. Is that right, Jess? So it would provide us with significantly more headroom by getting that credit rating, but it's still got to be paid for.
Yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to tease out, really, that shifting gives us options to provide for other parts of our community, and I think we need to weigh that up in the consideration of the decision we've got in front of us.
Could also just talk about the treatment of debt as well, because the treatment of debt is important, and the utility company that sits there, and you take a different view of long-term debt. I appreciate the way you deal with that debt. I appreciate assets to any great extent, around 12% for water assets. Whereas WSCCO will, or if we do a ring house, in-fence ring fenced in-house, we'd also be forced by the Commerce Commission to provide that appreciation. But the way that you handle debt is different in those situations because our debt is very short term. It's very short, 5 years, maybe 10 years maximum goes, but nobody takes a 10-year option, I don't think. But if you're a utility company and you're looking at an 80-year time frame and you're managing your debt over that time frame, you can do things differently with it. Still got to pay interest, but you can just do things differently in the way that you attribute that debt to the assets, etc., etc.
I think that probably comes from the context as one of the submittals around the 3-year cycle of elected members as well. When you're in a governance situation, you've got that longer term view of your capital expenditure and provision of service. So I think I had Karen and then Dave, Tom and then Vanessa. I'll never remember that, so someone will help me. Thank you, Karen.
I just want to pick up on a point that I think one of the submitters made, which is, government, central government could be much better positioned to organise procurement. Like how many tanks, at what level, if they were buying for all of us. Anyway, that's not the option we're dealing with. One of the things I wanted to just clarify in my mind a bit more is when we were in the C4LD, Communities for Local Democracy, one of the things that felt really clearly was local control. And I'm struggling to get my head around how we have more local control within WSCCO than we would with an in-house model. And like I don't think we would. One of the things that I know we've done is made a submission saying we should have provision for an elected member, for instance, to be one of the directors. But we don't know, we're not going to find out the answer to that, like what the government's decided on that, until after we've had to already make this decision, which is another example of your pack of cards, Dave, where cards get put in and taken out and not revealed and stuff. And I find that really frustrating. But I just wanted to check that that is the case, isn't it? We won't know until after we've decided what the composition of that could be, whether it could include or exclude elected members. And so it feels to me like we have less control. Yes, we can give the WSCCO parameters within which his statement of intent or whatever about what we want them to do. We might even have some influence over the appointment of some other independent directors, but that's it really, isn't it?
So the direct appointment process is that both councils will have to approve the directors. So the councils appoint the directors. Because they appoint directors, they can disappoint directors as well. So that's your ultimate control. And I talked before about having worked for a CCO. That CCO, the director got a message from the council saying we require you all to resign. And if you don't, we'll fire you. So the directors all resigned. So, that's that, and the council then appointed the mayor and chief executive as directors of the CCO. That's the sort of control that you can have. Now, water services CCO, because there's an explicit prohibition currently on council officers, that would mean that you can appoint other directors who did what you wanted them to do rather than ones that you don't. So that's the ultimate level of control. But the control mechanisms are largely through a statement of expectations, a shareholder statement of expectations, where you provide your expectations to the CCO. The CCO provides you with a draft SOI, statement of intent, which you then comment back to the CCO on, and then that SOI has performance measures in it, and measure the performance of that CCO. Now you could require the CCO to report to you on a monthly basis if you wished, saying we need these results on a monthly basis. So they would turn up to your council meeting and report on a monthly basis. mean, in my previous role as a chief executive of a CCO, I was expected to turn up at council meetings and give them a report, just like you get now on your operations water report. So, you know, it's really up to you to set the parameters for how you want that accountability to work. But at the end of the day, you do have those powers. They're not the same as the direct powers that you have of the in-house unit, because you're one removed.
Thanks, Karen. Dave?
I'm not sure if this is an after Smoko discussion. I'm pleased that we've got away from the CCO, and one of the reasons for it is the debt. Because, you know, we can do the debt and the ring fence by having an audit, being audited. Still doesn't mean to say we need to get more debt. Please, Hamish, what you just said, that we can now treat the debt and the ring fenced as what we would in a WCO, you know, a model, you know, and have it longer out debt, and that makes sense. I still just can't see in such a small area where Kaikoura developed infrastructure how we're going to get any economies of scale. And Pauline's procurement, you know, I think really is a way to get efficiencies of costings, but yeah, and that linkage we've just talked about of a CEO, we appoint statement of intent or whatever. I just see we've got two CEOs, two different cultures. We don't have whenever you have a new CEO in an organisation, I think it's 5 years and they've changed the culture and they've got another team of senior managers. That's just what happens. So yeah, but this is an after Smoko discussion. I'm just struggling with the whole thing. So not really questions, but
Look, I think we need to have these sort of questions or statements and have a bit of circular dialogue today, because this is the chance that we have transparency with our community, that we have debated long and hard about the strengths and the weaknesses of you know, the discussion that we've got in front of us. So I'm okay that we're just taking a wee bit of time to go through this, but I do take your point that it may be getting close to afternoon tea time. So I am going to go with Tom, then Vanessa, and then Robbie.
I think Vanessa was before me.
Oh, okay.
Through the chair, it's interesting just going back to Councillor Armstrong's questions around the structure of the CCO, that the statement of expectation that the shareholders have to give, LGNZ actually have an issue with that. It's quite interesting, they feel that the shareholders will have too much say on that basis and actually question whether or not we were actually in a position to obtain a high calibre of director on that basis. Anyway, it's by the by. Hamish, to get the 500% increase in debt ceiling, we don't have to be a multiply owned CCO.
No.
So on that basis, that deal or that offer effectively expires on the 3rd of September.
No, I don't think it does. I think under the legislation, if you were an in-house business unit and you said, well, this isn't working for us, we want to go to a single CCO, I presume that you could. There's nothing that I've seen in the legislation that would stop you.
Okay, so I'm putting that question out there as a bit of a backup in my mind, that, you know, further to what you raised, Murray, about attacking our bridges. You know, there is an option. If we don't vote for the favoured option today, it's not something that we can still have that as a backup, as a safety net.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a clarification, you said about separating the debt between water and roads and our bridges and what have you. But then you anticipated that our debt levels would go up over the next few years to accommodate those roads and those bridges and what have you. So we are now foreseeing massive increase in debt in non-water issues. And that will then exceed, I think Hamish said, exceed our debt limits within 3 years. So on the one hand, we have the water going up to 500%, and we're on our other areas of business are also going to exceed our debt levels. The future is looking incredibly debt laden, and I'm very, very concerned, and that is, yeah.
A flippant comment, I was told the other day, the 53 will be paid for the bridges in rural New Zealand, maybe the dairy boom may pay for it next year.
So this council has never contemplated increasing its debt on other things other than what we've got in our plan, not because of lack of headroom. We've never funded bridges through debt. Because the payback equation doesn't work because NZTA doesn't pay depreciation. It's paid, it's, you know, they operationally fund these things. And so it would be not palatable to use debt to fund bridges under the current system of payment, because the operational funding model, year-to-year operational funding model that we get from NZTA, it just doesn't work. We wouldn't be able to pay that debt back. So, you know, I'd be extremely reluctant, unless there's a vehicle that the government can come up with to match fund that debt, extremely reluctant to utilise our debt to pay for bridges.
But we are foreseeing debt on non-water business going up substantially.
Or not, but that's up to you. I mean, that's your decision, but I'm not seeing it go up substantially. I'm seeing that you put a limit on it that we work to. I mean, I don't see it going up substantially unless you want it to go up substantially. That's your decision.
And so if you've got a problem, then we'll come to Robbie, and I think we need to.
Can you kind of wait the on that basis? I guess you could say that the 500% increased debt ceiling becomes completely irrelevant.
So just to respond to that. So the 500% will apply to the joint debt ceiling. And at the moment, as Jay said, we're heading towards that 500% on ours. Kaikoura's is largely debt free, so it provides some headroom, but the reality is it probably doesn't need a hell of a lot more headroom, because, you know, ours just have to go slightly over, but, you know, we'll be in about the right place.
Use the headroom is kind of the whole thing.
So the headroom's there for disasters and all that sort of thing, but plan replacements, etc. You know, so long as they go to plan, you know, we're in the right sort of space.
Just for clarification, is that 500% on water?
Yeah.
Not 500% across all councils?
No, you remain at 175 or to 80 if you get a group.
Robbie?
Yeah, just clarification, because I think I can understand why Selwyn have gone independent, a single CCO, as opposed to the others that are just staying in-house. If I read it right, that an in-house one is run by an operational team, it is in-house. So would they still be in that tug of war with the annual rates setting, the election cycle, that political side that Mr. Kenny brought up, which resonates with me, an in-house team is still going to be in that tug of war where, you know, rates just not too high, or perhaps that project doesn't happen or whatever, as opposed to a separate that year in, year out, not stuck with a 3-year cycle or whatever. They are just doing it within their budget. And the other thing is the payback time. Do they have longer or shorter to address that debt or pay back, or on what, say, a council wouldn't have 10-year plan?
So, I mean, I won't comment directly on Selwyn's business, but you could imagine that in a high growth council, the pressures on debt and fund the development growth that's ahead of you are quite enormous. So generally, high growth councils face that particular issue. And so, and there's a whole lot of other facilities that high growth councils fund as well. So you can imagine that the pressure on your overall debt line is pretty strong as well. With regard to funding, yeah, we look in 10-year windows at funding. We do a 30-year infrastructure strategy, but some of the assets we're talking about are 80-year assets. And there's opportunity, as I said before, in a CCO to take a much longer term view of those assets. So it's not only the 3-year election cycle or the 3-year long-term plan cycle or the 30-year, the 10-year annual plan, or even the 30-year infrastructure strategy. You know, there's the ability to plan in much bigger cycles.
And solely focused on asset deliveries. And
Solely focused on.
Solely focused, you know, the attention of the stuff.
Look, I think that it's probably timely that we break for a afternoon tea. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting, and if we're back by 3 o'clock, we will continue with this. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, councillors. Welcome back. You know, prior to afternoon tea, we I guess circulated around the issues and to clarify further in our mind the options in relation to the recommendation that we have in front of us on page 1 of our report. There was sincere consideration of what our submitters have told us, and what councillors are feeling in regard to decision making. And I guess we know why we've come to this point, because of the lofty goal, I guess, you know, that we have in front of us. Our preferred position that we've spoken to our community about was to have a joint CCO. But it feels to me, in listening and hearing from you all, that there is a consideration around perhaps looking for some more information, but I need to know what that information might be so we can direct staff, if we're going to postpone this discussion until the 27th. But I just need to check in first from a meeting procedural perspective, we've got a meeting in 2 weeks, is that fair and appropriate that we ask that it could be first on the agenda for that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, if you don't get to a decision in this meeting,
Yeah.
then obviously you put it on the table.
Yeah.
And would be the first item for decision on that meeting on the 27th.
Yeah.
But, you know, we've still got at least a couple of hours.
Yeah, exactly, that's right, so, I mean, I
You know,
guess,
and you can go through to 10 o'clock at night, so quite a few more hours to make a decision on.
well, thank you for that option. But I think, you know, it's really important that, I think it's really important for councillors, for all of us as elected members, to understand why we've got the 2 options in front of us. What were the significant opportunities or strengths or weaknesses to, you know, that third option and the alternate option, and we need to weigh up what is going to get us this best position. It's always about what is the best position tomorrow, but actually in 10 or 20 years' time as well. So we need to weigh all of that up in our assessment of the information that we've got. So look, I'm just happy to host some more conversation and just sort of tease it out until we get to a position where we either look at a recommendation or look at an alternative for the meantime. So thank you, Fiona, then Vanessa, and then Ross. Thank you.
Just for clarification, when we talked about going to the WSCCO, we also talked about right-sizing council for what was left. That, firstly, I'm curious to know what that might look like and what savings might come from, if any, from that. And would we be right-sizing also if we go to a ring-fenced in-house unit? Does the same apply?
So right sizing will depend on what services the CCO takes from the council. So for example, the council could contract to deliver HR services, IT services, financial services, etc., which would have mean that forming WSCCO would have little impact overall on council pay for those services. So that's one option. The WSCCO, of course, could decide that it wants to do everything itself, and that would leave us exposed with overheads that are stranded, and we would need to deal with those stranded overheads. So look at a position like mine, for example, you know, over a quarter of that is paid for out of overheads from water services. And so the council would need, obviously, we come up with some options for council to consider to right size those overheads and look for your approval to do that.
So other than the CEO, there'd be other positions, or is that the main?
Yeah, finance, IT, HR, there'd be an impact right across all those overhead type functions.
Sorry, Pauline, I'll come to you. I've got one.
Can you come back to me after?
Yeah, sure. I'll go to Ross, and then I'll go to Pauline, then I'll go to Vanessa. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I guess I'm at the stage where I've absorbed everything and I'm sort of ready to lay my cards on the table, I guess. But I totally understand if other people want to still dig into it, but I guess I do this with my own business and make a decision and move on. So I'll wait it up.
Pauline.
Yeah,
I'll
just
come back to you, Ross, so thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to delve a little bit more into what Fiona was asking in regards to the whole right fitting thing. So who would make those decisions? Would it be the directors, or would it be part of the statement of expectation in regards?
Can you repeat the question?
In regards to the line that Fiona was going down and right sizing council and the impact that it might have on positions like finance, IT, CEO, etc. Who would make the decisions about what was contracted back into council? Would that be the directors, or would that be done via the statement of
With you.
Yeah.
Sorry. So my expectation is that council would give some pretty clear direction on this to the CCO for a start. And there would be contracts set up for the CCO for those services. However, over time, you know, those contracts have to be at competitive rates, and the CCO may over time say, actually, we can do this better either in-house or contracting someone else to do it. And, you know, that's just the efficiency of the market.
So that would suggest high risk for the rest of our business initially while that was set up.
Well, any business needs functions that support the level of business that it's doing, and those functions, those overhead functions have to be paid for somehow. And so you can only have an overhead cost that you can afford. And you need to structure your business around that. You know, the form of the business follows the function.
Yeah, I guess what I mean by risk is that in the initial period when that happens, and we might need to de-establish or you know, amalgamate things. Just another question, I don't know if you can answer this, but I'll go through the chair to you, Hamish. So we've had some really, really good reporting from Castalia. You know, they're an internationally renowned company. This is what they do. And I really appreciate having had that information. Do you know what have other councils done in regards to looking for information and modelling? Have they, is it like, because I guess because Mari asked the question, if we were going to delay a decision and leave it lying on the table, what other information would we need? Where would we get it, and could we get it in that timely manner?
So other councils have generally used consultants, but a variety of consultants, and they've done it in different ways. So we started out with 3 councils joined together utilising Castalia. Some other councils have taken that approach where they've joined together and selected their consultant and done that. Other councils have started by individually choosing a consultant to give them a view, a modelling view, and then sort to do a deal with their neighbours. So, you know, there's various approaches to that. As far as more information, it would depend on what sort of information you were seeking. The unknown is often unknowable, but the Castalia modelling has been done based on our existing data that we have, and you know, provides the answers based on that. You know, may find something else about ourselves or about something else, then that probably proves more difficult.
Okay, comfortable with that. I think I've got Vanessa, Dave, and then Bill. Yeah, thank you, Vanessa.
Oh, sorry, through the chair, Jason, we would be, our debt to revenue would be at 70% once we push that water debt off.
That's a very rough estimate, but I can.
Oh, sorry, give or take. No, that's all right. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
You said the right sizing, and have a figure of $1 million was set up for CCO. Is that included in all the redundancies and the changes of people or whatever? You know, there's $1 million in governance and set up of legals. And that's the first question. And then the other comment I make with smaller councils, you know, it's the flexibility of our staff being able to cover different roles is our advantage, you know. So it worries me, we go smaller, we have to even be more flexible. But yeah, so the right sizing, when you say right sizing, that's money. So there was $1 million was set at some point. Did that include redundancies and the right sizing?
So I think the $1 million was the Castalia
set up,
yeah, and in my mind that's rich. I actually think, I think
well, we're going to believe that figure, we're going to believe our other figures.
Well, I think it's rich, and any of those numbers, as I said, are based on assumptions, and they've made some assumptions, and
are they included in redundancies in it? We're
giving,
giving a third.
They won't include the council costs.
If you're taking a third of your staff out, they've been made redundant. Am I right or wrong
No, those staff are being transferred through to the other organisation, there's no redundancy payable. They're offered the same role in the same location at the same pay, it does not trigger redundancy. It's just a different organisation.
So they have to take it. I'm just checking that.
No, they can walk away,
But
but
they
they
don't.
don't get redundancy.
I've got Vince and Fiona and then Vanessa, sorry.
It's great to get the submissions we've got. It's actually got us all thinking. You know, when you start going into it, I just sit here and look at that big map. And I think it's one of the biggest decisions this district's has had to make since we amalgamated all our councils back in the 80s. And I'm proud of our water and our free waters, the work we've done over the years. You know, when I see a Haranui District Council waterman's truck go by, I think that's good, and all our community always supports them, and I think that's a great thing. I think we're at a, we've got to pick the best of a bad deal a bit, how to do it. You know, we're managing it at the moment, but it's all cost us a lot of debt, and we're reaching that, and how do we keep managing that? We've got the Commerce Commission, who's going to actually by default take over control, because they're going to look at our budgets, how much is spent, how much you're not allowed to spend on it, so we won't have the say in it. It'll be run by that, and I worry a wee bit politically on that, how that's going to work long term. But I'd like to move that we receive the submissions, and they've been great, and I'd actually support a CCO. I think at the end of the day, just weighing up all the pros and cons. I know we're going to lose. I worry about how the future of our rest of our council, because I think, like Hamish has said, we lose that whole side of that business, we're going to have to downsize and or else do other things. So, you know, we're at negative times, we're at exciting times. So, you know, it's a hard one, but I think I don't know what more information we need, but if they've got some good points, you know, I'd do it. But to me, in my mind, I see one submission from one of the original, the wife of one of the, was an instigator of the Cheviot water scheme, saying that they support a CCO. And I thought they've got a lot of knowledge of their scheme too, of the history of our side of the district. And I know I actually helped put in pipes when I was still at school. So, you know, there was a bit of actual physical doing it. So there's a bit of history in it, and people feel ownership in it. And I feel going in with Kaikoura is a good move. You know, I think they have the same values as us. And to me, that's where I stand at the moment.
Thank you, Vince, for those history, I guess, and some wisdom around that. So thank you for that. And we'll just receive that for the moment, and just we just need to circulate around this process. Fiona.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through this, and it's been a really long journey. So for me and Vince, I guess since they started talking about it, we've been around the table from very early days. I know, and out talking to my community, they were very supportive of the CCO model. And one of the reasons was that as more opportunities came along, they would have preferred, like one of them said, to have been tied in with YMAC for that greater scale, because the greater scale brings the greater savings. But they see it also as an opportunity to bring other people in other areas or provide other services to other people as well. So also meeting the fact that successive governments have wanted to see councils work together, and they can make life quite difficult when it's not, or they might change the rules altogether. So amongst all of those things, and I've got a great deal of respect for some of the people in my area who looked at that and have a good understanding of how those things work. It's not without challenges, it's not without unknowns, and some of those make me quite anxious, but I would be supporting it on the basis of the discussions I've had with people alongside all of the work and all of the information that we've got here. That's just where I'm at.
Through the chair, Hamish, can you remind me how many water staff we will transfer? Roughly?
Dan, do you have that number on the top of your head? Or number of water staff?
30,
They'll stay here
maybe.
in this building,
Most of them aren't in this building, most of them scattered out around the district.
but the base will still be here effectively.
Well, that has to be decided.
That's kind of the vision.
But-
That's the
but
intent.
We've got space for them.
Right.
They can,
So.
Yeah.
Couple of hands up here, so Pauline and then Robbie.
Just piggybacking on this, so that, that question about they would stay here, sure, that's, would be up to the CCO.
yeah, but once again, we provide a place where people work, the space is available, the staff are used to working here. The idea that you're suddenly going to work away somewhere else. I mean, we already have another organisation working out of this building. It's not a great leap.
Yeah, thank you.
Actually answering the question, Hamish. You know, because that's one of our, I'd say for every councillor here, that's one of our big concerns is, you know, what happens the day after, particularly with our team that we're very proud of. And I right, our intent would be, because there's the same amount of work to be done on our side of the fence as there would be over the Kaikoura side of the fence, that if we were to go that way, and presuming the Kaikoura agree to this, that would be largely based down here, not too much would change within our two teams, because they still have the same work doing the same area, different governments above them, but on the ground, not too much would change. Would that be our intent at least?
That would be the intent, that the guys that are based out in the field would still continue to be based out of the field because they're sensibly based out where their work is. That they know their schemes, they are almost semi-autonomous in some of the stuff they do, and they actually value that ability to get out, get on with the job. So my intent would be that we continue to deliver, the water services continue to get delivered in the district in the way that they've delivered currently, unless there's some really good reasons for change.
Given that answer, I feel that it has been a long process, and I feel that I'm happy with what I've learned and understand up to now, and that would be one of my biggest concern. And I think if I allowed that fear, I'm at this stage would be leaning towards the CCO. Largely, that consultant, that submission around the taking the political side out and having a crew that are doing their thing, regardless of what's happening in council world. I think that's important, and you really have to refocus on what else has to be done. But I'm comfortable where I'm sitting now, which one I would support.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Through the chair, so therefore, Hamish, it would be business as usual, pretty much.
Yeah, at the end of the day, water's got to come out of people's taps. They've got to flush their toilets, and it's got to work. And what's happening now is that it all works. Our team are really strong. You know, Dan and Co have built up a real strong team there. There's no reason to change any of that I can see.
I can't imagine therefore there'd be any negative impacts on service delivery then on that basis, because I know that is a concern amongst people in the community. So I guess for me, it's probably a pretty obvious question, but for anyone that's listening, I think the community need reassurance to know that it is business as usual. Nothing really will change as far as they're concerned.
So as far as those service levels go, it would be an expectation of this council that current service levels are maintained or enhanced. There'd be no acceptance of any service levels going backwards, And you might find with really focused governance and management that you actually do get enhanced service levels. And that's not a criticism of what we've done, that's just a reality.
And I don't believe that any one of us sitting around this table would be expecting that any reduced level of service would be an outcome. We're entering into a new world, whatever that new world might be, preferred option 1 or 2, but actually we're entering into a new world to ensure that our community is being future-proof, and that's the challenge that we've got sitting in front of us. Yeah, that's cool. Thanks, Vanessa. Dave?
I always make decisions on my feeling and my gut feeling and what I think, over time and what it smells like. And based on information, I'm definitely against the CCA model and believe a ring fence model, we've got the ability within our team to be able to deliver what the Commerce Commission wants. Are we going to have the same in 5 years' time to what we've got now with culture and that? I don't think so. Different CEOs, different organisations bring in their own flavour and their own culture. The economies of scale joining up with Kaikoura, can't see that, are fully developed. See councils, CCO appoints their CEO, he appoints the staff, culture. That setup cost of $1 million, someone's got to pay for it. The reason for doing it, the debt levels, we've talked about that. We were told liability, personal liability on all us councillors. Well, that's sort of been now it's not there. What's this council? What are we going to be doing next year as councillors? We're taking a third of our work away. So there's a whole lot of, to me, does Hurunui Council need to be there? Is it amalgamation? Is it something else? Hamish might say once down this pathway you can unwind it. Maybe you can, but once you change the structure, it's hard to go back. I'm proud of what the Hurunui Council is. So what else have I got? Personal ability. I talked to a whole lot of the Christchurch City Councillors about why they went down that road versus whatever. And I think once Waimek played their cards, that sort of led us down to it. So I'm 1.5% totally against it.
Thanks, Dave. Vanessa?
Thank you, through the chair. It's likely to be my last question, actually. Just if you can remind me, Hamish,
I can't remind you of that.
No, I know. Good luck.
Pay drop.
Oh, far out. Dave, it's your fault. So, okay, if we look at the in-house unit and we transfer that water debt and we get our debt to revenue down to around 70%, our forced depreciation, increased regulatory costs, if we don't pursue a credit rating, we're going to end up leaving ourselves with very little headroom. Am I right?
No, I don't think so, because we're not forced to depreciate, because the assets that we're talking about are our roading and our building and land. So at the moment we're not depreciating land and buildings. We don't charge. I mean, we depreciate this thing, but we don't charge full rate for depreciation in CCs. So it will have no impact on rate so long as you continue to vote for a budget which doesn't include rating for depreciation. You'll continue to do that.
Okay, sorry, I thought that was something we had to.
No, it's only for those Shree Waters assets that
Okay.
by the Commerce Commission.
Is there any other questions to clarify people's positions, or I'm getting a sense that councillors at this point have got a position that they would like to pursue, but I just want to be certain that there is no more information. I mean, I've heard from Pauline before, perhaps, wondering whether there is more information that is required. So I'm happy to consider that as an option, but I'm also happy to consider if there's a position statement and a recommendation that's coming through. But I don't want you to go away and thinking I missed on something that I should have explored before I made my decision. So I just want to give you that time and Ross, did you hear that?
Madam Mayor, will you follow due process and we can either speak for or against the
Yep.
motion?
I quite like to get a motion on the table, and then I would apply standing orders.
Okay, thank you.
But I guess can I just ask Graham for advice if the motion is that we take the preferred position, and if that motion passes, that's well and good. If that motion fails, then we just go to the default position that Tom was talking about earlier. That would be the in-house business model. Is that what would happen?
I guess.
Yeah.
Council could move the motion to explore other options. Or might be preferable to actually adopt the other option.
Yeah, okay.
I guess it depends on what council wants to put forward, and CEO might have some advice about that.
Okay. I just think everybody needs to be clear. If a motion is received and moved and seconded, that we consider the preferred option for the services delivery packages here. If we get a move and a seconder in that position, and if it passes with voting with a majority, that's fine. But if it doesn't, I just need to understand what is our next position here for council. So that's what I'm looking for, some guidance.
The key thing is if the motion fails, then you can't put another motion that's essentially the same. So you can put something that's different.
So if that was the case, we could I could receive a motion on an in-house as and move that. Is that sufficiently different from the first one or not?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I think it's important everybody's clear on that without having to go to any other, consultation or, that we can actually make that decision if we don't achieve a majority in this potential resolution that's sitting in front of us. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to go around the table actually just to check in to see whether you've explored everything that you need to explore before we look at a resolution of some sort. Robbie?
Yeah, I was just looking at the motion and thinking we don't have to put anything like subject to Kaikoura's agreement or anything on it, because that'd be a secondary thing of this, depending on their decision down the track. But now I think I've got an idea that I'm aware of gamble if you like. Don't know whether they'll push harder that way or not. There's quite a few complexities in it, but I'm comfortable with that.
Any further questions?
No.
I'm satisfied that if we take this to a resolution that you're in a headspace that you understand.
Yeah, I understand. I absolutely do understand. I think not a question, but I do wonder about the pressure of making the decision today when we can in fact make it on the 27th. And that may not be about more information, it might be about more time. There were some points raised in Gary Jackson's submission in regards to more information, and I appreciate that when we discussed this earlier, Hamish, you said, you know, you go from high level, you take it down to lower level, and then, you know, it may not be as reliable, but it's a really big decision, it's really significant. And so I guess that's sitting in my mind at the moment.
If you were going to ask for more information on one option or option A or B or one or two, you would need to have that granular evidence offered for both, and that, you know, that's something that probably needs to be considered in the timescale that we're talking about. Vince, is there anything more in your mind? I know you've declared where you're sitting, but are you satisfied with that we've allocated some good thinking to this decision? Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
If Kaikoura decide not to go ahead with the joint CCO, I would like the opportunity at that point to revisit the whole situation. And that would be my preferred option, whether it's failing to meet the government deadline, whether it's exploring other options, whether it's actually voting to go it alone. I would like to do that, but I would like to do that when we have our vote here and when we have Kaikoura's decision as well.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just thinking about that from a process perspective, that if Kaikoura go in a direction that is not congruent with this, I guess it may be that we would need an extraordinary meeting maybe to consider to manage the time frame that we're working within as well. So I guess I would leave that with the CE and the executive team to actually facilitate that rather than waiting for another whole month at the end of June. It may be that we need to, you know, have something a little bit more purposeful, functional from a timing perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, and that allows my vote, whichever case it may to be an affirmative vote, not a vote on a default or unknown position. I do not like my vote becoming a vote on something that I do not know.
Yeah.
The
I think we've got that, and it will have been documented, and I think it's beholden to all of us, but particularly Hamish, for you to actually make certain that happens if that's the case that eventuates. I think we've heard that now. So thank you for that. Fiona, anything else?
Nothing further, but I do agree with Tom on that one. If it went that way, and if it doesn't, it's not an issue, but if it does go that way and we don't have Kaikoura, then we need to rattle our dags and not make any assumptions about where we are. We need to understand the options.
Yeah, that's right. We'll be really certain about our position statement as a district, because we owe it to ourselves, but we actually owe it to our community as well to be certain and confident, and to use one of the submitters to be bold or courageous around that. And I think that is something that we do take personally, and we consider it's really important as well. So thank you, Fiona. Vanessa, anything more?
No, I'm actually happy to vote.
Yeah, good
I'm
on
going to
you.
be bold and courageous, Mary.
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't laughing at it like that.
Awesome. Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I've really enjoyed this discussion, and you know, as our submitters were not unanimous, that will probably be the case around this table a wee bit, and that's great. This is a democracy. That's how you work it through, and we don't have to all agree, and we can still walk out that door and look each other in the eye. And I think that's really important that we do that. And I just look at the strategic objective, and it's to deliver good quality services supported by sustainable, resilient infrastructure. And whether you sway one or the other, that's the outcome. So I think it's just been great, robust discussion, and ready to vote. Thank you.
Any further comments?
No, ready for a vote, ready to vote, but I'll probably say it more when we get into the next section.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
Yes, I came with 6 points that I felt I needed to clarify and understand better. And as you will have that I've been through a lot of those, and some have been covered by others as well. I picked up on the, level of significance is high, and that's absolutely the case. And I guess I was feeling that Gary raised, as you mentioned, Pauline, some really good points in here, and feeling that I needed more information so that I could weigh up in more detail the pros and cons of, like for like data on each side, you know what I mean, and in more depth. And so I don't know how we can do that, or if that's even possible in the timeframe we've got there, but I'd like you to comment on whether that is possible.
So if you can be specific about the data that you want to see.
Yeah. So what about, I'm looking at section 8 on page 3. And so, for instance, he's talking about, should I read it?
Yeah.
I don't know, but he's talking about being able to compare what were the HGC debt levels, identify water services debt plus all other debt year by year in comparison to threshold ceilings, given the accelerated depreciation funding required by the local town requirements. And also the associated implications for total council debt versus the borrowing cap year by year based on LTP assumptions.
I'll take you knock that out, Jason.
Need to break it down into components. So that
Do you want to read that? Do you want to read that section?
yeah.
Do the specific numbers matter, or does it matter that the CCO will be able to continue on within its existing debt cap, and the council will have debt at 7% or something, and that we're not going to breach the 175 unless council wants to do something else, or subsequent council wants to do something else. I mean, does it matter what the specific numbers are? Because does the comparison of the numbers actually change anything?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that the Castalia numbers are based on data that we provided, that's right, isn't it?
Yep.
And so Kaikoura's data will be the same. Yep. A lot of the early calculations were done with the WIMAX data in there as well. Yep. And when I thought it was the 3, then the scale thing made a lot more sense. And I just feel like, although I think that I can see that there are some clear signals that a water services CCO would have some benefits, or maybe position us better for other opportunities in terms of joining with others. I feel like it's sort of like the best of a bad lot. It's kind of just meeting the bar, but it puts us perhaps in a better position to get the economies of scale and those other advantages by joining with others later on. Can we, through our influencing the setup of the WSCCO, can we influence the onus on them or on us to support them to look for those opportunities proactively? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Like, can we help trigger that happening?
So in the statement of expectations, you can say it is our expectation that you will have ongoing discussions with other entities, with the councils or CCOs, to find opportunities for scale. So yeah, absolutely, you can do that.
Okay, because I think that would give me more comfort, because I think that's the way you really make it work, rather than sort of making the best of a bad lot of the hand that we've ended up with, which is not the hand we thought we were going to be positioning ourselves for, you know. So you're right, maybe a whole lot of detailed numbers isn't going to make any more or less of a compelling case. I just felt like there was a theme from a number of our submitters saying, we feel that we haven't got enough information, and they haven't been on the same journey with us as we have. But even then, and I think you made the point earlier, Hamish, a lot of the assumptions are quite high level, and there's a lot of unknowns. And I guess I'm looking for certainty probably where there isn't any, but it feels like a big gamble, and it's our ratepayers' money, or assets that we're gambling with. And I guess I'm like everybody here, very mindful that it is a huge decision, and I just wanted to be sure as I can be, with the information and the hand we've got to play, that we are doing the right thing. So, and I think mostly, I feel assured that we can, if we're very mindful in how we set it up, we can make sure that we will achieve all of the benefits that are potentially possible. So I have no other questions. And it's okay, Jason.
There is a component in that, the query there around, the accelerated depreciation funded depreciation, that I don't know whether we've got categorical answer on what timeframe do we need to move to get to there, and it will be different in any structure that you're in, because of the effective Kaikoura as part of the permits. We could make an assessment of trying to be 100% of depreciation funded within 3 years of, and I can easily show that, but it will, in the long-term plan at the minute, we are proposing to get to 100% depreciation funded funding for water in year 10, but that requires a 6.5% increase in the rates year on year. So if we were to try and get there, we'd probably need 3 or 4 years of 20 or 30% increases in rates. But the upshot is that, and then after that, we can plateau out, but being completely the expectation of the Commerce Commission and also the funding provider.
We haven't started for a WSTP year 10. So see what's the response we get to that. But, we've got a pathway, it's been agreed with their ratepayers. I don't see why we need to change that, despite the Commerce Commission wanting it done faster or whatever. So we've got a water service delivery plan that's been signed off, and it's year 10, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you. For what it's worth, I have really struggled with this decision also, guys. I have been backwards and forwards, and this is a big moment in time for our district, actually. The one thing I would say is that I feel whilst the numbers of submitters, both oral and on the papers that we've heard and read today, whilst the balance of numbers is pretty well split, I think my weighting was for those that attended the public meetings that we had and scattered across the district. The in-depth analysis for those submitters has probably helped me define where our position should sit, and the fact that there was a different, to my read, a different level of understanding of the complicated complex decision that we've got in front of us. Dave, I totally appreciate your discussion around, developing culture and not losing culture, not losing staff, not losing
the integrity of the service delivery that, you know, frustrates us all from time to time, but actually we're all incredibly proud of as well. So, you know, if I can just
I
finish.
probably should point out, and it's not when we get to vote a blackmail or anything like that. A director on a company that really is against something, thinks it's really fundamentally flawed, I am unlikely to stand next year for you in the West Ward. I feel so strongly about it. So I'm just putting that on the table, but it's not going to influence anyone because I think the model's flawed. So, and yes, I'm just putting that out there now.
Fine. So I guess if I may finish, I think that this is something that I would like us to be as influential as we possibly can be if the vote does go towards the joint water services CCO. It is beholden on the members that are sitting around this table next year, or the end of this year even, to be influential as possible to future-proof the water services delivery model that our district deserves and has supported for a number of years. So I think that's something that's really important to all of us, and that's you know, from a financial perspective, cultural perspective, and a sustainability perspective. So I think it's a struggle that we've all had over the last few while as we've got to this point of making a decision, and there will be strengths and there will be weaknesses to, you know, the pathway that we choose, but our job is to be as influential as possible to ensure that there is no slip or slippage of service support or delivery to our community. So having said that, I guess it is, if there is a readiness for a resolution, I would be happy to receive the resolution, and if there is a seconder, it will be fine, and then I will apply standing orders. I would receive 3 to speak for and 3 to speak against the resolution that's on the table. Okay, for a good vote. So I'm in your hands.
Sorry, can I ask a question? I want to support what Tom was saying before, that if we, I mean, I would share his position really. I'm willing to support this on the basis really that Kaikoura wants a joint one as well. And if they don't, then I want us to have the right to revisit what we do. Yes. Because we haven't consulted on a single WSCCO either, and I don't see why that should be off the table. Or, you know, I think we should still have a right to have that in the mix or look at other options. So that wording as it's written in number 4 there in Hamish's recommendation, for me doesn't provide that proviso. That's the right word.
Have you considered some other words that might
No, I haven't gone there yet. Tom's probably gone there though.
have you got some words that might embrace, you know, what Tom suggested and what Karen supported, just so we get the one resolution, or we have another resolution actually that separates it out? Maybe might be another way of going it, Karen.
Is it the discussion of the
Yeah, well, I wondered about that, but I guess what I'm just trying to tidy it off.
I'm not sure. Could you take out the council's preferred option for use? That this council wishes to join a water services delivery plan through a joint water services council controlled organisation with Kaikoura District Council. And sort of making that much briefer, and that is purely and simply.
Perhaps subject to Kaikoura's.
Well, that's implicit in
Yeah, that's
we can't force them to do that.
Just part of the journey. I wonder whether it's a separate, to just encompass, whether it's a separate resolution, if this resolution passes.
Yeah, I think that if we start adding other things to this resolution and the resolution fails, then you're going to close a whole lot of doors.
So make a
So-
separate resolution.
So at the moment, it's quite open what could happen in the future. If this resolution passes, then it passes. If Kaikoura says no, well then we've got a blank slate that we can start with again. If you start putting things in this resolution,
Yeah, okay,
then you might close doors unintentionally.
yeah, okay.
So,
And I'm guessing that the minute will actually reflect that, you know, we need to go back to,
well, officers understand the position
correct. Yeah, okay.
that you want
yeah.
to look quite widely.
You comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with that, Karen? I think that's kind of where we got to before, but I just, think it's late stage in the day, trying to make it.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. So with that,
I'll second it.
have I got to move it?
I
Karen,
just worded it.
oh, you've got it.
I was going on hold.
Didn't you move it earlier?
No, you moved it, but didn't you?
You did say you wanted to move it earlier on.
The original one.
Give me some guidance.
Well, councillor Daly did indicate he was
Willing to
to
move
move
it
it, but,
earlier, yeah,
you didn't sort of accept the.
No.
but it was an application.
yeah, okay. Yeah, happy to do that? Yeah. So you're back online, thanks you. And are you happy to use the revised sort of wording or the wording in here? Yep, to what? Yeah. What have you got, tell me?
Well, councillor Daly moved the
Yeah.
officer's recommendation.
Okay, that's fine, right, so let's just leave that wording as it is, so it's implicit that what's gonna happen next. Karen, does your second sit in that space, or let me see if I've got a seconder for that resolution.
Tom was second.
I'm concerned that that resolution as it's written, it's the preferred, it says the preferred option, but actually what I wanted was a vote on the option, not a preferred option, on the one option. So that if that option fails as a result of Kaikoura not going with us, then we do need it again. By leaving in preferred option, you are leaving in flexibility and woolliness, in my opinion.
It's the preferred option, not what we,
And the wording is done advisedly.
Yeah.
So that if Kaikoura does back out, we'll say, well, that was our preferred option, but we're now looking at everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So if we said this is our option,
yeah,
then we then have to somehow go through and undo the
Yeah.
motion because we don't have the support of Kaikoura. So I think preferred option leaves us with scope. I understand
yeah,
that it doesn't look as conclusive, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was done advisedly that way.
okay, so. Tom, is there a willingness to second it or?
No,
Not got one?
I'm not at the second
Okay.
line, I'm upset what you're saying.
Thank you, I'm looking for a second.
I'm prepared to second it, and I would comment that preferred option is how this was referred to all the way through our consultation papers as well, so it makes it understood that when they option one, preferred option, option two, so. And I understand it leaves the options open, so on that basis, I'm prepared to second it.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got a majority that we have a recommendation moved by Vince, seconded by Fiona, with the wording in number 4 on page 1 of your report. As said before, I'm going to put standing orders in place, I guess, and happy to receive statement from councillors. You know the rules, but 3 for, 3 against, and then I'll put this to vote. Thank you.
So what are you having first?
Rejoice.
Oh,
Ross, thank you.
Madam Mayor, look, I'll speak, and I'll speak against, and it's, look, this is coming down to, you know, I'm sitting on the fence and it's falling with the north wind one way, and I'll just have a brief talk, because there'll be a time limit, I guess. So Vince mentioned history, and he fell the other one side of the fence, and I think of history and I'll fall the other side. And so that's how we see things differently. You know, I look at the history and I want to retain that. So that's why I would speak against this motion. And there's a comment, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's how I feel. We've got a fantastic water team. They do fantastic work. It's been built up over years. And to me, I'm old school. If you've got a good team, keep working with them and they work for you. I sort of feel a bit spurned by Wellington that with the regional deals side of it, I think that just annoys me. That's like, you know, if you're good boys, follow the line, we'll give you a wee lolly. That annoys me, and if Wellington's listening and or watching us, that's how I feel about that. And then it's what's left of our council. And okay, they'll still be working here, you say, but it's stranded overheads, and that's, I have a concern about that down the track. And I'll use a quote from Robbie that Robbie uses, that you know, I won't throw the toys out of the cot if it goes the other way. You know, look, I respect everyone's decision. We'll all try to do the best for our communities, and I totally respect that, and respect you all. So that is my 2 pennies worth. Thank you.
Anything else? Floor's open.
I suppose you've heard what I said, the why, don't believe in the why, my feeling, feels bad, staff led down the garden path on liability. And how I think we can deliver what the Commerce Commission wants, future, what's left, stranded assets. I respect everyone's decision, they can make their decision, but I'm going to stand by it. I'm going to get my life back next year. Totally think it is totally flawed business model.
Vanessa, I'm going to speak against. I know the uncertainties are a part of the course, but there's too many uncertainties and not enough advantages as far as I'm concerned, and I think you do a bloody good job in-house, and I feel on that basis we should remain in-house. It wasn't an easy decision for me, which is unusual.
So councillors, I've heard 3 against the motion as it stands. Does anybody want to speak for the motion? Robert?
Yeah, I'll speak for. So, and it has been, you know, here we are at the crossroads, and you're sort of, you know, left or right, left or right. If I go left, I'm looking at setup costs. These are the things that, you know, leaning that way. And my concerns about, you know, what's left and the remaining functions of the council, you know, they were probably my big what ifs if it goes that way. I think I've got assurances that our best intentions, at least, is to continue with business as usual as far as our team, and I stand by that. You know, there's still the same amount of pipes that they're checked, and still. So I'd like to think between the two of them, the two councils, there's not too much chopping and changing there. You know, you want to keep the good people that we've got now. The debt advantages I can see. That's quite a big one. Outside of the discussions that are all around water, I quite like the idea of tallying up with, you know, someone else, you know, at the playground, another kid in the playground, if you like, with Kaikoura, for across other fields, perhaps. I think they're coming down the track, but I think it's you know, we've built a relationship, or we're building one with Kaikoura. I think there's only advantages in that. And I still stand by the one that focused it a wee bit for me, is that political, that focus for the team, not stuck on, you know, what are we going out with rates, what are we, you know, our different criteria that we sometimes have to make decisions on. I quite like the idea that, to me, if I break it down, we've got largely the same focused team with a different governance team above them that are not interested in anything else but looking after water and doing the water best they can. So that's why I think, you know, I think the term's being used about trying to make the best out of two bad decisions, but it kind of feels a wee bit that way. But on the whole, I think no, looking down the track and quite aside as to what the government may or may not do. But I think if we set up, that gives us more options than just sort of putting our head in the sand and hoping it works out okay. So for that reason, I'll be voting for.
Councillors?
Bear with me, because I feel kind of almost ill. And that I think for anyone who's listening, and I know for everyone in this room, is the weight and the significance of this decision. And so I am going to speak for the motion. But before I do that, I just want to really acknowledge Ross and Dave and Vanessa, because you know, I completely understand the reasonings for speaking against it. And I also want to acknowledge all the submitters and those who gave us the food for thought, because, and I am emotional about this because it is a heavy decision, but I heard them and I have concerns. I'm really concerned about another level of bureaucracy. I don't ever see that saves money. I'm really concerned at how our council will look after this. I'm really concerned as to whether or not we'll actually be able to find the appropriate skilled governors for this new entity. And I am concerned that actually the cost efficiencies and the economies of scale will just be minimal. However, all that said, I will be pushing for us, if this comes to fruition, for us to have some local voice in the way that our governors are selected, whether that just be from within our district, if the legislation doesn't allow it to be from around the council table. So I'm committed to advocacy for locals and community connect. I would like to state that actually when it comes to that statement of expectation, Murray, you used the word influential, and it's my intention, if I'm sitting at this table, to be influential in making sure that that statement of expectation is very, very clear, and it is what we expect of the governors. And I'm also committed to, because this was raised on both sides of the submission process, I'm really committed to actually controlling our debt. So when we know that our water debt is moving off, that for me is not free rein to use that ceiling that we will have gained. So yeah, I want people to really understand that. And also one of the things that really probably has swayed me is I sat around this table, you know, during the time of Three Waters and the time where we were being told where our water resources and infrastructure would go and who we would work with. And at least in this, we have the opportunity to make a decision about who we, for want of a better sentence, who we get into bed with. And I think, you know, if we are going to join up with anybody, Kaikoura, we have shared services with them, we know we have a relationship. I'm really proud of how brave this council has been in the way that we have managed our infrastructure, we have upgraded our infrastructure, we are in a really good position. And I do think that Kaikoura, they have good new infrastructure, you know, not of their own doing actually, but of a natural disaster doing. So if there's anybody for us to be in the ring with, I do think it's Kaikoura, but I'm just over the line. And, you know, I just wanted to give the constituents a really clear message. I hear their concerns and, you know, I hold them and I carry them with me, but I will vote for the WSCCO.
Statement to be made. Okay. Thank you for that. So we do have a resolution, and it is in line with number 4 on page 1 of the agenda. We've heard willing to speak for and against, but with that, I'm going to put that motion. All in agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Three against, thank you. That motion is carried.
Can we be recorded?
You'd like to be recorded?
Thank you, yeah.
Vanessa, yeah. So the motion is carried by majority. Look, there's not much more I can say really. This is a big step for us as a small council that is incredibly well connected to their community. This journey has been long and arduous, and we've actually learned a whole lot of stuff along the way. But it is really, really important that we continue to deliver the services that we have, we've had in the past. And I'll use that word again for whoever's around this table to be as influential as possible to ensure that it is a betterment situation beyond today for the community that we serve. So thank you to the team. I know Hamish, Dan, Jason, and Judith and Claire. You've all done a lot of work to get us to this position, and yeah, there's not much more I can say. Thank you.
Thank you.
The meeting is now closed. 6:09. Thank you. 4:09.